It's what's up? What's up? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Um, yeah, I know. I told you guys it's going to be starting to be after 7, closer to 8, but it is what it is. If y'all can't watch it, you guys can come back and watch it like the next day or something. Right? Right. I got my phone like right up in the face. What's going on? What's going on? I'm still trying to catch up on that case. I'm listening to the hubby. I was listening to him a little bit. Still got more. Still got more to listen to from the what's her face? Lindsay Clancy? Clacy? Mm-hmm. Any noodle. Let you guys come in here for a minute. Let y'all get settled. Let y'all get settled. Has there been any updates with this war stuff going on? I haven't seen any. So I was just curious. I haven't seen any war stuff. I don't know what's going on. Reporting for duty. Reverend Gunn. Hello there, sir. Yellow. Let's see if what's his face is showing any. Um Agenda free. That's what I was trying to say. I don't think he is. I don't think nothing is actually going on. I really don't. I don't think anything is going on right now overseas. And I haven't really checked X either. Let me see. Let me check X. Um I haven't heard nothing. Mm-mm. Audio files from special counsel investigation. Da-da-da. They're circling around him. My latest on warrior diplomacy. That's with Joe Kent. Huh. Which I'm going to be talking about anyway is playing some stuff with Joe Kent. All right, let's see about this. Joe Rogan today. I'll play this. I'll play this. Hold on. Who is it? Who is it? Hold it. Let me do this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No notification. Figures. Not surprising. Not surprising. So, is it Timothy? Where's it at? Where's it at? Where is it at? There it is. Let me do this for a second. See what this is actually about. The Joe Rogan piece. Details surrounding the destruction of Jazan refinery in Saudi Arabia due to Houthi attacks, highlighting the impact of regional conflicts. Yes. So Holden, I don't know, he has 153,000 followers. Holden Colt, check here. You know what? Let's just do this so I don't butcher the name. Right there. There's his name. Timothy Albert Brino, Alberino, Rhino, Alberino. just warned Joe Rogan that we are on the brink of apocalypse, but not the kind you think. He calls it a post-human apocalypse. Post-human apocalypse. The tech oligarchs are obsessed with transhumanism. Technology is ascending. We are declining, which is true. We are. And I'm not in favor of that. I'm not a transhumanist. We poison our environment. We poison our bodies. But it's clear to me that we are degenerating. This is generic degeneration. We have what's called mutational load. Mutational load is all of the. Why is all these? I hate when. Anyway, maybe it's. I can't. I'm not the best reader. I'm just going to be honest. Deleterious mutations that happen in all our. Oh my goodness! Whatever. It's probably because I'm not even used to half of these words. I'm like, what? They compile and it becomes this genetic burden. See, I couldn't be no announcer or actually like on a professional newscast as an anchor, especially writing things like this. You can't just have good diet and regain the capabilities that were lost. The human species is essential, becoming reproductively viable. Sperm count of males in the West is declining. Not presumptuously, precise. I don't know. Whatever. Precipitously. I don't know. I'm not good at spelling out. Pretty much it happens. A lot of big words there. There are a lot of big words, but I'm like trying to like why? Anyway, so let's see what he says. So obviously he's trying to say that apocalypse is coming, but not the kind we think of. Basically, is wiping out humanity from inside out.
We're going to be able to talk without if we keep developing better and better versions of technology. One of the things that the gaps that we would bridge is Elon said that. He said we're going to be able to talk without words.
Well, the problem is that our technology is getting better, but our species is getting dumber.
Right. And our biology is getting weaker.
And
we're poisoning ourselves.
But it's not just because of poison. Yes, we poison our environment, we poison our bodies, certainly. But I believe that it's clear to me that we have degenerating, and we are degenerating. We are degenerating. So, and this is genetic degeneration. So we have what's called mutational load. Human beings, all creatures, we have mutational load, and mutational load is all of the deleterious mutations, all of the negative mutations that happen in our genome. They compile, and it becomes this burden, this genetic burden. We have all of these mutations that we're carrying, mutational load. And the further we go down the line, the more mutational load we have. And again, these are deleterious mutations. So you get all kinds of problems from that. I mean, we basically, what it amounts to is we become less and less and less impressive over time.
Right.
And there's nothing we can do. You can't reverse that. You can't just have a good diet and get and regain the capabilities that were lost. That's impossible. So we're declining. Our technology is ascending. We're declining. So what we're headed for essentially is a post-human future, a future in which we have to evolve ourselves out of this condition. I would say out of Adam into something else. And I'm not in favor of that, by the way. I'm not a transhumanist, but clearly, you have this conundrum where we are clearly getting dumber as a species. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I can't reference it here, but I saw some data on this the other day, and it's astounding. It's kind of alarming. And not only that, we've realized, and I try and remember the reference to this book that details this, but the human species is essentially becoming reproductively inviable. The sperm count of males in the West is declining precipitously, as is our fitness. So that is on the decline, such that I think the projection is in 2045 or something like that. We're going to basically be reproductively inviable. We're going to need a technological intervention like artificial wombs. Well, what's happening right now? We're developing things like artificial wombs. So it's very interesting that these two things are running in parallel. We're degenerating, but our technology is increasingly getting better. So the result of this is going to be what I describe as post-human apocalypse. I mean, we're headed for a future that's not human. That's what the Yuval Noah Harari is out there prognosticating, that in, I think he says in 120 to 130 years from now, there will be no more human beings left on planet Earth. So why am I saying this? Because I'm illustrating that you go back in time. You go all the way back to the beginning. If you come from a biblical paradigm like I do, you're in the first man, Adam, the prototypical man. He has all of the incredible capabilities that are innate, built into his system. He's communing with his maker. He's governing the earth. He can do all of these amazing things. And then as we become copies of Adam all the way down, we're gradually losing these abilities. But I think that some of them are still, latent in the human species. And I think that explains remote viewing and telepathy and things like that.
All right. I don't know what to say to it. I think because I'm like, duh. So to me, it wasn't anything that was too, for me personally, it wasn't anything that was too, like, wow. I mean, and I'm not dismissing or whatever for anybody that was like, wow with it. It's just like, to me, it's like, well, it's common sense. It wasn't anything to, I mean, so all those big words were written that I couldn't read, partly because of what he's talking about. We just get dumber and dumber. Honestly, like, I don't, like, here's the thing, like, if you can't look around and see all this type of stuff for yourself, then I don't know. And it's weird. Here's what the thing is weird about it. It's like, so someone like himself or someone bigger than himself or whatever, they go on Joe Rogan or a big podcast like that, and then it's like, oh, it's unbelievable, or it's like, wow. But like I said, if you pay attention, if you're in the scriptures and you understand the Bible and what's written, and you know what's going to come, and the handwriting's been on the wall for years and years and years, right? It's kind of like those movies, right? We see something and we see like a James Bond movie or a Mission Impossible and stuff like that. And remember the movie Surrogates? When did that come out? Like back in 2002 with Bruce Willis in it. And we're like, okay, and we chop it up for entertainment purposes, downtime to watch a movie, but they're laying all this stuff out before us. Jetsons. I know, we make fun of it. People talk about the Simpsons and all this type of stuff, but we make fun of these things, but they're precursors to what's already there, what's already being developed. It's just they're already developing artificial wombs. Yeah, I mean, all sorts of stuff that they're miles and miles and miles ahead of us. And like I say, I keep saying it, we're just sitting ducks. We're just waiting for them to roll it out on a public, big scale platform. But it's already there. And what do? But we watch the movies, we hear the things, and we're just like, okay, well, whatever. And it has to be like whatever, because there's so much information nowadays. What do you do with it? Even that probably alone makes us dumb too, because there's so much information. It's just overload, or our brains are overloaded with so much stuff. Day to day, we're paying attention to the news. We're watching this, we're watching that. We're paying attention to this politician, that politician, this city and that county, and that governor and this mayor and that police department, and then the riots and the left, and what's happening in the schools, what's happening in the libraries, or what's happening at the grocery store, and what's happening with the gas. So it's so much information just going into our heads nonstop. I mean, partly that probably it makes us dumb as well. Yeah, Hunger Games, exactly. Hunger Games, Maze Runner, movies, all these type of things just show us what's to come and how we're going to be fighting each other to survive and things like that. So listening to him, I wasn't like, whoa, like this is some huge type of thing. And yeah, if you go back, I mean, you can go back, like he said, going back to Adam, which was the purest of pure when it comes to humanity, right? Taking care of the garden, tilling the earth, but then again, how much of Adam was complete, right? Because he fell into sin, and then after that is when death enters the world. So Adam, Eve, whatever, because of sin, then death enters in the world, which death then is upon us, right? Because of that. So all sorts of things start to destroy us, which is why the scripture says to be born again. And even with that, we still have a time clock on our mortal bodies. But even with our mortal bodies, when we're born again, there's a lot of things that God can redeem, right? But still, it's handwriting's on the wall. I'm all about doom and gloom. I mean, I'm not really. It's not. Here's the thing. It's like I'm not about doom and gloom. I'm about the realistic pieces of what Scripture says. And that our hope is in the Lord. Our hope is what's to come, not here on this earth, right? And yeah, it can suck because we live in this weird zero time frame. Like this time doesn't exist. This time frame doesn't exist in the scope and realm of eternity. This is like nothing. It's a blink of an eye. Like it's nothing. But yet it counts for everything. It's so weird. It's nothing. Life is nothing but a vapor, right? Blink of an eye. But it counts for everything. It counts like this zero time counts for life. So weird. And that's actually pretty powerful if you think about it. This time that means everything means absolutely nothing and doesn't even really exist in the scope of eternity. Goodness gracious. So anywho, wasn't that with Stallone? What, the Judge Dredd? I don't know. I don't even know the Judge Dredd movies. Humans will be extinct, purebloods. Yes. That's kind of like what he was saying, practically. Yeah, Timothy just warned Joe Rogan. I'm like, I don't know. Like, you think they are? You think they have the Ark of the Covenant? I think it's a very strong possibility they do. Graham Hancock makes a very compelling case that they do. The whole depiction of these people that are the watchers of this thing different stuff. So that one's like at 53. What's he saying here?
Hancock makes a very compelling case.
Do you think they have the Ark of the Covenant?
Who's they?
I think, let's put it this way. I think Graham Hancock makes a very compelling case that they do. Have you read his book, The Sign and the Seal?
Yeah. The whole depiction of these people that are the watchers of this thing get cataracts because it has some radiation properties.
Yeah. Very compelling narrative.
Yeah. None of them live more than a couple of years after they get the assignment.
Yeah. I think it's a very strong possibility that they do.
That's crazy.
It would be crazy. Yeah. And I think
I need to watch the one.
Many people, including Graham, think that the Ark of the Covenant there's something technological about it, something radioactive about it.
What?
But it's interesting though, because you have the idea, at the very least, the potential for technology in the antediluvian world, right? Advanced technology.
Do you think they have the Ark of the Covenant?
That's crazy. I don't know who they is.
I think
whoever they is. Pastor Russell. Y'all know who they is. All right. So recently, Joe Kent was on the Brandon Straka show. I have not watched it, So I want to be joining and watching this and reacting and talking about it along with you guys. I didn't watch it. There's another Joe Kent thing that he did as well, which is like 4 hours long. So I didn't play that because of time wise late. But I will because I want to see. I think that's going to be more in depth. But I want to get into this, see what this is about, what he's talking about. Like I said, there's not really a bunch of other stuff to report on that's going on in the news. It sounds like the Seattle shooting from last night went to 3 people who were shooters. Some people could be on the run. That's according to, I think Jonathan reported that. Cho. Doesn't the Bible say that the ark was taken to heaven? I don't recall that, Tanya. I do not recall that. I don't know how it would be. Where's the chief? After Monday morning's press conference, Seattle Police Chief Sean Barnes got into a beef with a reporter who questioned why he was out of town so often. Barnes lost his cool and had to be restrained by security. Socialist Mayor Katie Wilson held a second press conference this afternoon, but Barnes was surprisingly not there. Did he get benched after his reaction to the reporter's question? Either way, local media has started to question why Barnes is frequently MIA on weekends, especially when lots of crime and other problematic incidents happen in the city. Barnes reportedly rents a place in Seattle, but his wife and kids still live in Chicago. So that was this morning, speaking about Seattle and the stuff that happened last night. So Brandy Cruz talked about it. Yeah. Candace Owens sounds like she today mentioned the event and the church pastor, and well, actually the church and the pastor where Erica Kirk was at on Friday. It sounds like Candace mentioned by name. Maybe was it by name? Yeah. And I guess he may have spoke about her, but not by name on Friday night at the event. So I can't remember where I heard that about the ark. Yeah, I don't know, Tanya, where that would be at regarding the ark. So, all right, let's go. Let's hear what's being said.
Joe Kent is a retired U.S. Army Special Forces veteran, former CIA officer, best-selling author, former director of the National Counterterrorism Center, husband and father of 2. Over a military and intelligence career spanning roughly 2 decades, Kent served in elite special operations before later working in intelligence focused on counterterrorism. His life changed in 2019 when his wife, Navy Senior Chief Shannon Kent, was killed by an ISIS suicide bombing in Manbij, Syria. Together, they had 2 sons. Kent later co-authored the best-selling book, Send Me, The True Story of a Mother at War, honoring Shannon's extraordinary life and service. In 2023, he married fellow Army veteran and artist Heather Kaiser, who has spoken publicly about helping Joe and his sons rebuild their lives after Shannon's death. Kent entered politics after leaving government service, running twice for Congress in Washington's 3rd District. In 2025, he was confirmed as director of the National Counterterrorism Center, where he coordinated America's counterterrorism intelligence efforts. He resigned in 2026 over disagreements with the administration's Iran policy. Today, Joe Kent is one of the country's most prominent voices on national security, military affairs, intelligence, and America First foreign policy. It's a lot. So we're going to get into a lot of things today. Iran, Israel, working as the National Counterterrorism Center director, Trump, the MAGA divide, America First, and more. But I want to start by asking you about your early life. So
the MAGA
before
divide.
politics, you spent years in the military.
Hold on.
And looking back now, what did those years teach?
Speaking about the MAGA divide, the MAGA divide is almost as serious as when it was MAGAs and if your family members were liberals, or vice versa. Like, seriously, this is how bad the MAGA divide is. Just as brutal, and you actually lose friends over a president and little small things, even to the point of disagreements or different views on Israel. People are losing friendships. And it goes to show, honestly, I know people talk about this, like, you gain friends, right? You gain friends within this movement or that movement or this and that. You do, but when friends are based off of movements, and then when they cut, and if they're tested, they do not last, it wasn't true friendships. Because no friendship should be able to be broken off over a president or over some other things that really aren't personally affecting you, if that makes sense. Like, even if some people have some different views on Israel, like, yes, it is an important topic because it's biblical, but is it worth? I don't know. Here's the thing. You know what's crazy about this? Now that I'm saying this, might as well just go all the way through with it. People will break up friendships over Trump and politics like this more than they will a friend who is not a follower and believer in Christ. Think about that. People will say, well, if you're not following MAGA, if you're not a Trump supporter, if you're on the left, oh, we're not cool because you're crazy out there. People don't even do that with people who don't. Supposedly, Christians, how we're supposed to be different and separate and not part of the world and XYZ. We will stay friends with people who are blatantly against God and his ways. Like, we'll stay friends with them. And in fact, in a lot of cases, even with old boy here, who's kind of on the other side of the fence, nobody's going to come after Brandon Straka. Oh, he's a Trump supporter. We're fine with it. We're fine. We're fine. As long as he loves Trump, as long as he's MAGA, and then we'll congratulate them for certain things. But if he was against MAGA, we would dismiss him. But him being against the Lord, oh, it's fine. Crazy. That is super crazy. But that's super crazy. We have lost the ability to have rational disagreements. Yes. And especially regarding the Israel situation. Yeah, that's one. Yes, that's one. But there's several others. But that is one also, Tanya.
Wow. Pretty much everything. So I joined the Army right before 9/11. So 1998, I came in, always wanted to be a commando of some sort. So was in the Rangers, was in the Special Forces Qualifications Corps. So the process to become a Green Beret when 9/11 happened. And then after that, just pretty much deployed consistently to war. So I would say it really formed the base of defining who I am as a man. It was the big test, the big adventure. I think something that most young men need to go through to really find out who they are. Combat does that very effectively.
That's good.
For all the obvious reasons. But then seeing the way that our country was galvanized, and then a lot of that honor and willingness to sacrifice was squandered by our political leaders. It took me a while to figure that out. And then I kind of branched into intelligence, as you mentioned in that biography, because I really wanted to figure out how I could help contribute to our decision makers, our leaders, getting better ground truth. So something like the Iraq War never happened again. And that's really what led me to the MAGA movement, essentially.
Interesting.
It's a long journey in there, but I learned in the military, pretty much everything about personal accountability, about serving with, great people and being, in debt to them. But then also wanting to continue to serve, because this is a great country. The people who step up to serve this country, I think, deserve leaders who respect them.
You're welcome, Matt.
And then who are willing to lay down their lives as well. So,
and you met your late wife, Shannon, while you were in service. How did you meet?
So I actually met her the first time in Baghdad, real briefly. We ended up working on a target we were going after together. She was in intelligence and I was an intelligence collector and special operator. So paths briefly crossed, and then we both ended up at a pretty elite specialized unit in special operations that combines intelligence operators with special operators. So that's where we met and dated and got married.
What made you fall in love with her?
Oh man, it's one of those things where you meet your person and you just kind of know. We were kind of cut from the same cloth. We both really wanted the same things out of life. Both of us had lived very fast-paced lives because of the war. She was killed on her 5th deployment. By the time I met her and we started dating, she'd already been deployed 4 times. So we both knew, we understood where we were coming from. We both were very serious about serving our country. But we were both at the same time very serious about, starting a family and building a legacy.
So I guess, I mean, when you're in service, you always know that is a risk that could happen. But when it actually does happen to you, how does that affect you?
Yeah, you're right. It definitely is something that you always know could happen. I saw it happen to lots of friends over the years, both me being there, but then also just other guys I knew throughout the years who were killed. With Shannon, it was like watching a train wreck in slow motion almost, because she was killed a month after Trump tried to get our troops out of Syria the first time. So President Trump gave the order to get our troops out in November, like late November, December timeframe of 2018. And she was part of the task force that had defeated the last stronghold that ISIS had. And so her and the people she was deployed with were supposed to be out of Syria Christmas Eve of 2018. And that would have gotten them kind of out of harm's way. But because of what happened with a lot of the mid-level bureaucrats dragging their feet, President basically being deceived and not getting our troops out, she was left there. So I had this burning feeling in the back of my head. I was like, at some point, if they leave our troops there with this unclear mission, with the Department of War trying to justify why they're there, sending them out all these different operations, someone's going to get hurt or killed. It's just a matter of time. That's the way these things go. And so I was afraid that she was going to be, one of those people. Even one of our last text messages, I was like, be very careful, don't be one of the last ones to get killed in a war that almost everybody's already forgotten about. And unfortunately that's what ended up happening.
And you were left with 2 very young.
That's impacting. With a war that everybody's already forgotten about. Think about that. We go to war. We're like, oh, our brave soldiers and women and XYZ. Right? We get the presidents to, rally behind these missions, which are for who? They say it's for American people, right? And see, here's the thing. We say these soldiers go to war for our freedoms. That's what we say. Or that's what's been told to us, right? That they're fighting for our freedoms. What was the last war that we've had that anybody fought for our freedom? I'm being honest. I don't know. I'm not dismissing or discrediting soldiers, but what was the last conflict that people went to war for our freedom? Because our freedom comes from our Constitution. Right? That's where our freedoms come from. Freedom of religion, right? Freedom for somebody wanting to be a homosexual. Freedom for somebody wanting to change what they look like. That's the freedoms. So what freedom, right? And unless there's another freedom I'm not thinking about. Right? And that's a possibility. Maybe there's freedoms that I'm not thinking about. But when I think about our freedoms, freedom of what? So what are these soldiers fighting for our freedoms? Am I missing something that I don't know of? That is it so that we can exist? Or is it civil rights freedoms? Or what is it? Exactly. And if it was World War II or Vietnam, and see, and then here you go with that. If it's World War I, Vietnam, World War II, we're all over the place because we probably don't even know what soldiers have fought for our freedoms according to what's been said or placed in our minds. And again, that's not dismissing the soldiers who go to war, but the point is, I guess what I'm trying to ask or say, what is the exact reason these people are going to war or conflicts? Like Joe Kent just said there, a war that people have already forgotten about. So obviously it wasn't for us. Whatever they were doing wasn't really for us, like to benefit us, was it? Or if it was to benefit us, don't you think we would remember? Like it would be something that is remembered, right? Like we remember 9/11. Like everybody can say where they were on 9/11. People remember Pearl Harbor who are alive, right? Historical, memorable things. So if somebody was really fighting for our freedom, we remember what Christ did on the cross so that we could be free from sin, right? To live a righteous life if we so choose, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, what are these things and why has it been said to us? And is it a detour? Like, a distraction? Like, it's being told to us to remember these soldiers or to remember, not to remember the soldiers, but to, the fight. Is it for us to for the freedom? Is it so that we're not looking at what the real issue is? Oh, they're fighting, for oil. Exactly. When the oil embargo hit the U.S. shores. Okay. Yes. I would say that the Iran movement is 49 years too late, as in this is work that should have been done around 77, 78. Right. Yes. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, what's this stuff really for? Is it really for our freedoms or is there something else and they don't want us to know there's something else, so they say it's for our freedoms? That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. They're saying one thing when it's really not the one thing. It's for something else, but they program us to think it's for the freedoms.
Boys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Single father.
Yeah.
So how does that turn your life upside down? How does that affect you?
It changed everything. So I was actually overseas as well. I wasn't in Syria, but I was in the Middle East. I had just started with the CIA. And so I knew I immediately had to return home. I felt very irresponsible for being overseas as well. At the same time, I was like, had the enemy gotten lucky that day,
Wow.
my kids could have been orphans. So I knew I needed to resign from the intelligence community and just focus on being a dad. So we moved back to the Northwest where I'm from to get closer to my parents and just basically kind of reordered my life from there.
Well, was there a time where you didn't really know what your future was going to be? I mean, were you sort of unclear what is the next part of your journey?
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's where having kids, I think, gives you some clarity because I knew that I needed to put them first and I'd figure out everything else later. But it was a big, identity crisis. I mean, I think a lot of veterans talk about this when they leave the service, they don't know what to do because it's basically been their entire identity. So I had been in the military from the time I graduated high school. When I technically retired from the military, I started literally the next day at the CIA, doing very similar things.
And here's the problem. And here's me jumping the fence for a moment. This is the problem that the left has with Trump because of the unfilteredness. And I would say, personally, I'd say the unprofessionalism of him as a president. Yes, we can love the things he does, but this is an example because you guys know that he came out after Joe Kent and his wife once Joe Kent didn't back this mission up of Iran and Israel. Why would you do that knowing who he is? But maybe he'll get into that. But I'm just saying this is one thing that the left has that they don't like about Trump. And I think other people are starting to get to that point slowly that the left has with how he can speak. And like I said, I haven't watched this. So I don't know if he even talks about it. So.
And so when I knew that I had to leave that line of work of getting shot at for a living, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to focus on being a dad and I'll figure everything else out, after that. And in many ways, I'm still trying to figure that out.
Right.
So.
But shortly thereafter, you did decide it was a good idea to run for Congress.
I did.
So
yeah.
What led you there?
Glutton for punishment, I guess. Yeah. Especially in the Northwest.
I've thought about it too. That's why I'm laughing.
Yeah. I mean, really 2020. So I thought in 2019, after Shannon was killed, I was going to be able to just kind of go home and focus on, the kids. But then seeing the way that between the COVID lockdowns, between the riots, I grew up in Portland. I just moved back to Portland, Oregon. My folks pretty much still live about 3 miles away from like the epicenter of where all that violence was. So watching Antifa and basically what I viewed as our society being torn down. I thought that I had to do something. I moved right across the river to Washington State. My congresswoman decided it'd be a good idea to vote for Trump's impeachment because of January 6th. I had, I'm sure we'll get into it later on, but
Yeah.
I had issues with January 6th from the very beginning, just a gut
So did
feeling.
I.
Yeah, right. And it turns out we were right. So I said, okay, I'm going to at least, I'm not going to just sit here and complain about it, because I didn't see anybody else stepping up to go and primary her. So I said, you know what, I'll give it a shot. I'll try. I was successful in the primary, but then ultimately was not successful in
But you ran.
Yes, Seven Lilies. Joe used to hang around a lot of the guys that Joe was involved with us. I'll just put it that way. Joe was involved with us in Portland and in Washington. I have footage of. I was trying to get I had his number, but then when he went to Congress, we fell out of contact and all that type of jazz. So I don't have his number, and it's harder now to get a hold of him than it was then. And the people that did have his number, Joey, it's done change. His number's done change. I don't think Gibson talks to him anymore, but he was always around Gibson and me, a lot of the Portland people. Yeah. So Joe was always around. There's actually footage of him. I think Villain might have some on his platform still. BCB, did you watch any of the debate con? Was that what debate one? What was? No, I did not. Which one was tonight? I haven't, to be honest with you, Paulie, I have not been paying attention to that debate con, all them modern debates. I haven't paid attention to it recently. Who was on? What is it called? Oh my goodness. Yeah, modern day debate. I haven't paid attention to anybody that was on. So I did not watch it. Anyway, let's get back to this.
Twice.
I did. Yeah. Tried again the next time, because why not? Yeah.
Okay. So obviously the first experience was not, you were like, you wanted to try again.
We were really close. So I beat a 12-year incumbent in the first run, having millions spent against me by the Republican establishment. And then we have late primaries in Washington State. So basically went into the general election with zero money. The Democrats are smart, and they sat back and they dumped all their money in during the actual election itself, during the general. And I lost by less than a percentage point. So I said, okay, well, it's only a 2-year ramp up. So
sure.
I just decided to give it another run.
So you did well. I mean, all things considered.
In the primary.
And you certainly, I think, got a lot of people's attention. I mean, that's when I, came to know who Joe Kent was. And I think a lot of people came to know who Joe Kent was. And then, flash forward to 2024, Trump gets reelected. And at that point, you become the director of national counterterrorism, the National Counterterrorism Center. So when you got that job, what was it like at first?
Yeah. So right after Trump won and my congressional election didn't work out, I had connected with Tulsi a while back. And Tulsi and then the Trump transition team. So went down to West Palm Beach with the transition office and basically started working on Tulsi's team as part of her transition team specifically. So actually, I came in on what's called like the landing team. So during the transition, came in, represented ODNI, led part of that transition, and then started out as Tulsi's chief of staff. So I kind of had a front row seat from the very beginning. I would say the energy initially in December 2024, January of 2025, it was very high energy. I felt like there was a focus to really advance the president's America First agenda. It felt like we were very much the insurgents who had just won a popular mandate, because we had. And so it felt to me, very vindicating, but also like now we had a really big duty to all the people that believed in not just President Trump, but believed in Tulsi and believed in all of us other folks who had, really put our name on the line for this cause. We had to deliver. And so we were working, very long days, which we were all very, very happy to do, because we felt like we had a very, very important mission.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to get into in a moment that you resigned, obviously, in March. But initially, when you first started, did everything feel as you thought it would? Or were there any initial feelings that you had that this, just didn't feel like what you thought it was going to?
I'll tell you one thing about Joe. what you see with Joe here, and every time you see Joe and when he speaks, that's how he is in person. He was this way in Portland, even hanging around before he was like a name like this. This is how he is. He's very low key, mellow, and talks like this. He'll laugh. I mean, he'll be loose a little bit, but he talks like this. Have to get to bed, but wanted to stop in really quick. Have a great night, ECP and chat. Thank you very much, Star. Make sure you hit that like button, please. Please hit the like. Helps the algorithm, and I do have the links pinned on Facebook and YouTube. You guys, if you guys want to help out, again, I can't do this stuff without you guys getting out, going here, going there. Can't do without your guys' help, without your guys' blessings. So appreciate it.
Not initially, no. There was a lot of people who I'd connected with over the years that were, getting key positions in the administration. All that felt very good. It felt like all the right people in the establishment were mad that we were there. And so, no, I honestly, maybe I just had my blinders on. Maybe I was riding that high as well, but I didn't see any flags. I'm sure we'll get into it until, the lead up to the first part of the Iran war. But for the first couple months of the Trump administration, I felt like we were full steam ahead and everybody was online with basically what had been promised on the campaign trail.
So it came as a little bit of a surprise, I think, to people when in March you announced that you were resigning. Mm-hmm. You put out a letter stating that you disagreed with the administration about going into Iran. Yeah. And I think most people probably read your letter, but just for anyone who doesn't know, what was the nature of the disagreement?
Basically on why we went to war with Iran. I mean, I identified, and I think most of this has basically been confirmed, that we were driven into this war by the Israelis. And so the Israelis did a very good job from their perspective of convincing President Trump that, number one, this was going to be quick and easy and that this was in our interest, when really this was completely in Israel's interest only. President Trump's negotiations, and we can talk more in detail about this, his negotiations that have basically been kind of sidelined, they were working, they were making progress. President Trump in his first administration, his Iran policy, I thought was very sharp. It wasn't giving them everything like the JCPOA did, like the Obama deal did. It wasn't, getting sucked into foolish wars like George Bush did. When it came time for us to apply force, it was very targeted, but it was very significant, like President Trump killing Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mohandas. But again, it avoided that trap of getting sucked into a war. But that wasn't what the Israelis wanted. And the Israelis came in and they were very effective at using both their senior government officials who had almost unfettered access to our senior government officials, their donor network here that has access to the president and his members of his cabinet, but then also their media apparatus and their lobbying wings, their think tanks, using them all in unison basically to convince President Trump that his policy, which was working, wasn't really his policy and it really wasn't going to work. And then to kind of get us into this war, I was just absolutely appalled that a foreign government was able to march us off the war. And especially when we started taking American casualties, that was too much for me. We can get into more of that.
Well, can you say what you think the president's impressions were as he was being approached by these donors and the Israelis? Was there any resistance on his part, or was he just sort of open to what they were telling him?
So initially in the early parts of the Trump administration, I'd say like around February, March timeframe, there was definitely a push. There was the initial wing of trying to get President Trump on board to at least do strikes against nuclear facilities, just to be much more aggressive towards Iran. And I was pleased to see that the president at the time was not interested in it. Now, I wasn't in all the meetings. Maybe there was a different meeting where he was like, actually, I am interested in this. But from my perspective, and my perspective was at the time as the DNI's chief of staff, giving the president intelligence briefings. So most of the formal intelligence briefings we were there for. Now, people will come and say he wasn't there for, certain briefings, possibly. But my general read at the time was that the president understood that the Israelis wanted us to go do significant military strikes in Iran that would be in their interest and not in our interest. The president had a lot of faith in his negotiators, and his negotiators were making progress with the Iranians. And that's where I thought initially that's where he was staking most of his focus and his efforts.
Did you make any efforts to try to change his mind?
We did. And it was, pretty cut and dry. The intelligence community for the last, I'd say 10, 15 years has been pretty unanimous in agreement that Iran is not moving towards developing a nuclear weapon. And that's not because they don't know how, they're not sophisticated enough. It's basically their policy. They saw America go into Iraq because Saddam was kind of coy and said, yeah, maybe I have WMD, maybe I don't. They also saw us go into Libya after Gaddafi gave up all his nuclear weapons or his nuclear material and his development capability. And so the Iranians had a policy that basically said they're going to be a breakout state. They're going to have the ability to enrich. So they could have a nuclear weapon if they wanted to, but they weren't going to have one. This was basically their doctrine. We watched them enforce this doctrine. We would just share this with the president because he would always have the question, like, are they going to get a nuclear weapon? And we would just take him through that. No, Mr. President, they're not, a month, 2 weeks away from getting a nuclear weapon. It would take them anywhere between, 3 to 4 months all the way to a year potentially. Then they still had an issue of delivery systems. But then we would explain to them, like, this is their actual defense doctrine not to have one because of what they've observed in the world. And it actually kind of makes a lot of sense. They project power through their proxies. This is not how the Iranians fight, essentially. So we were able to offer that up to him. Unfortunately, though, you had the Israelis were able to come in and directly feed information to members of the cabinet. Now, that information technically should have gone through the IC, and they would put it through the IC, but then they would short circuit the process by going directly to the cabinet members who would give it right to the president.
Interesting. Well, so let me ask you, last year we were told that there were strikes last year. We were told that Iran's nuclear program was obliterated. Mm-hmm. And it seems this year it's like that messaging just sort of went away completely. So what was that?
I mean, this is the problem with the enrichment issue.
Yeah.
And the president, again, initially he recognized this. So President Trump has always said, and I think he was even saying it today, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Under the previous supreme leader and the previous Iranian doctrine was Iran won't have a nuclear weapon either. That gave the president and the Iranians a starting place for negotiations because they basically agreed on those terms. Everything else was in enrichment. Iran said, we still need to have the ability to enrich. The president initially wasn't hung up on that, but this is what the Israelis did effectively. They used their official apparatus. They used their media wing to come in and say, no, the American policy is based on this Mike Pompeo quote from 2018 that says Iran can't have any enrichment.
Oh,
so
wow.
if you have to say there's zero enrichment and Iran can never have any enrichment, you're forever chasing nuclear dust. You're forever chasing a capability. So when we basically went in and bombed all the enrichment sites, that was the president's effort. In my opinion, that was the president's effort to say, okay, take the stupid enrichment issue off the table and let's get back to the negotiating table. The Iranians agreed because the Iranians didn't unleash their proxies on us. They didn't attack us. They fired a handful of missiles at an empty part of one of our bases in Qatar, and they immediately got back to the negotiating table. So the nuclear sites, for all intents and purposes, and the enriched uranium was obliterated. There was no reason to continue to chase it. Now, was some of it buried at the bottom of a caved-in mine? Probably. But the Israelis came right back and said, no, they still have, enriched uranium there. You have to go back in and get it. And that's where you hear all this talk about now we have to go in and we have to physically secure the enriched uranium, because basically that is a pathway to get us involved, get us endlessly committed to going into Iran and taking down the regime and occupying ground there. That's what the Israelis want us to do. They can't do that on their own. So they need a way to sell us on it. Enriched uranium is one of the ways that they can do that. The Israelis don't care about the nuclear file. They don't care about the enrichment. The Israelis view this as the time to take down the regime, right, and their sales pitch to us, because we find this issue, terrifying, and it's a good talking point. They're going to get a nuclear weapon. They're crazy. They're jihadists, et cetera. So that's why they have us chasing this, enrichment and this, so-called nuclear dust that's buried, miles deep.
Well, okay. So for the average American out there who, I would say the messaging on Iran has been inconsistent and muddied, sort of at best. Just to reiterate, how should Americans think today about where Iran is with their remaining capabilities?
In terms of the nuclear file? So look, the Iranians are pretty smart, and they are closely aligned with the Pakistanis. The Iranians, I believe, if they wanted to, they could enrich nuclear grade uranium, and I think they could make a nuclear weapon. There's still an issue of delivery system because it's a little bit more complicated to be able to put it on a ballistic missile, et cetera. If they did do any of that, I believe that we would see this. Now, the Iranians, I don't think, are dumb enough to give us that, because if they were to do that, then we would have a complete justification for launching basically, an unrestrained war. So right now, the Iranians' nuclear facilities, they have been set back a good deal because they were completely obliterated. But again, the Iranians are smart people. I fear now, because we killed the Ayatollah who was enforcing that prohibition on developing a nuclear weapon, I do fear that you're going to have more radicalized folks inside Iran. And there's always been this give and take inside of Iran between the hardliners and between some more of the moderates. Now, a lot of the hardliners for a long time said, hey, who's not worried about America attacking them anymore? North Korea is, because they got the bomb. And so a lot of them for a while were pressuring the Ayatollah to, develop a nuclear weapon. I think a lot of those guys they basically had the case made for them. I think that the guys that are in charge in Iran right now, though, I think they're playing a more of a long game, and I don't think they're heading towards developing a nuclear weapon.
Do you think there's a scenario in which American troops are on the ground?
I don't either, Matt. And I think, honestly, this is the problem I think Candace and some of the people are having. And I don't think Joe Kent is per se in the same. I don't think that it's fair to put everybody in the same box that is not in agreement with the Israel and America thing. He's coming at it on it sounds like a very professional, well thought out view of it, right? And I do not think that Bibi is part of the Israel that the scriptures talk about. Although, like I was playing last night, Israel is still the land. So it's like this weird double thing going on. Like it's complicated. And I think Bibi represents more their government side rather than the Israel of the Bible side. And that's where it gets hard, because then you got to how do you still defend the nation and land, as scripture says, when you have a government doing what they're doing? It's kind of like us here in America. Well, there's Christians here in America, but our government is like wicked, right? So the same type of thing, it's a hard one. It's very difficult.
Around in Iran?
I fear that. Yeah. I think thankfully when that fighter was shot down inside Iran and we had to go in and recover the pilots, thankfully we got everybody out okay, but we got a taste of how dangerous ground operations can be there. So I think that operation is probably why we haven't seen it yet to this point. But this is the problem with having to chase down, the air quotes nuclear dust. The only way to actually get in there and secure that nuclear dust is for the Iranians to let us come in, which at this point is not going to happen.
No.
Or for us to actually forcefully go in there with a military force. When you just look at the geography and the size of Iran and how much of their military they still have intact, their drones, their ballistics, that's going to require a lot of guys probably losing their lives.
Wow. You're an America First guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, if we ended up in some sort of prolonged conflict with Iran, and certainly if we ended up sending troops on the ground, is that a failure of America First policy?
Certainly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because look, I have no compunction or issue with us deploying troops when there's a vital national security interest. Like if a terrorist organization or a nation is going to attack our country, or if they have attacked our country, absolutely. Like, let's take the risk. This is what we pay a military for.
I agree with you.
I don't have any problem with that. The thing is, Iran does not pose a direct threat to us right now.
It's still the land.
This war was launched. We were
again, their land is bigger than what you see. So is the modern state of Israel biblical? Yes and no. Like the government isn't per se. There could be Israelis in the government, but here's the thing. The modern state of Israel, no matter if it's modern or whatnot, overall, Israel is at this point in time anti-Christ, because Christ did put a blinder over them. So even if it is a real Israeli, if it is Israel, they're blind and they're going to be lost and deceived and live in degenerate, just like anybody else who's lost and deceived, because it's part of prophecy. And until God fulfills that prophecy, they'll stay that way. If it is Israel, I do believe that their land is supposed to be bigger than what it is. But yeah. So there's a lot. There's so much conversation, which is fun conversation. It's great conversation. But there's so much conversation when it comes to this whole Israel topic, which is amazing that people are so interested in and invested in it. I mean, if you think about this, even 4 years ago, it was the same way. Israel was still anti-Christ, still not believing in the Messiah. Nobody was talking about this stuff. So it's kind of cool that we are, because of what's going on. It really is cool that we're talking about this stuff and having dialogues and debating it, discussing it.
were told it was an imminent attack, and then Secretary Rubio came out and actually said the truth. He said there was no imminent attack from the Iranians. The imminent attack was that the Israelis were going to force our hand and attack the Iranians. And the Iranians had already taken an attack once on the chin and not struck us. And so we knew that this attack, especially if they felt that we were going to go for, if we or the Israelis were going to go for regime change and try and kill the Ayatollah, that they then would attack us. So that's why we attacked. There was no actual imminent threat there. There still is no imminent threat. The Iranians are not going to come here and bomb us here in Washington, D.C.
Right.
tomorrow. No. So it would be a complete and total failure.
So what?
Regarding that, no, it's all Abraham. I've heard the modern Jewish people are Hagar's children. Hagar's children are the Muslims. It's Muslim religion, so it's not Jewish. Hagar, the Jewish people are from Sarai. That's where that lineage comes from. Hagar's lineage comes from, or lineage is the Muslims. Sarai is Israel.
Does a successful America First foreign policy look like?
Us just judiciously using our foreign policy. And I think right now we're so overstretched throughout the entire world, trying to be the world's sole superpower, providing security guarantees for the entire world, that we have made, we've put ourselves in a more dangerous position. We're actually not supporting really the people that we say are our allies. Just ask the people just ask our Gulf allies. For years, we said, hey, if you let us base our militaries here, we'll provide for your defense. The Iranians proved that that's just simply not the case anymore. And so I do think we need to relook at how we, deploy American military might, but also how we're using our security alliances and make sure they're completely aligned with a vital national security interest that we can define to the American people. We have troops deployed in this area for this reason that directly benefits you, not propping up some old alliance like NATO, not trying to provoke Russia, not trying to be adversarial against Iran, focusing on what our national security interests are. I think we should be doing a lot more at the border. President Trump did a good job by securing the border, but there's a lot more that needs to be done to stop the flow of fentanyl from coming into the country and actually killing Americans. I think most Americans understand that.
Well, so let's go back to Israel for a moment. And I mean, I have lost thousands of followers over the last month, even just by hosting debates where we're debating the issue of our relationship with Israel.
We've done enough. No more.
Back to Israel for a moment. And how much risk do you think the United States should be willing to assume on behalf of Israel?
We've done enough. No more. A year and a half ago or so, I probably would have said, hey, there's some things we can do. We can share information. However, the Israelis drove us into this catastrophic conflict that is affecting the Straits of Hormuz, which affects the world energy and the price of the pump here. It's basically upended.
Sorry. That's a good question too, Paulie. And I don't know. You think you don't think Trump's angle is to also hurt China by limiting the oil? I don't know Trump's angle. I don't know. I'm not that close to him. I don't. I mean, it could be, but here's one thing. Here's one thing I do know: that all nations are going to turn on Israel at some point, and I think we're far off from that. I don't think it's any time like really close that all nations are going to turn on Israel. But that includes America. And after listening to some of the End Time Prophecy conference, there's some things like, okay, it makes a lot of sense. He said regarding one of the things that he said, how tied in is America going to be into like Revelation, end time stuff. And here's one of the things. The question, I guess, how far are we going to be removed or away from all this stuff happening? Because that, biblically speaking, that's all ground zero. We are hardly even mentioned in Scripture. We're not mentioned by the United States. We're mentioned by the bird, the eagle. And then at some point, it's not even talked about no more. So are we going to be eliminated? Are we going to become dust? This nation is, us strong people. We're proud and everything else. Are we going to become nothing? Could. I don't know. So I don't know how much, even if Trump is trying to hurt China, how long will this stuff last? Like, like I think I mm, I think by 2030 we're going to know some stuff. I'll just say that. Even by 2028, I think we're going to be in something, knowing some stuff. 2028 through 2030, we're going to know where we're at on God's timeline in Revelation, in end times, in tribulation. I think we're going to know something by then. Honestly. And do I think Trump's part of it? Yeah. And is it in the way that a lot of evangelical Christians think, that he's this Cyrus? No. I don't think it's anything working for God sort of thing. There might be some. I don't personally. Not saying he's against God, but I don't think God's using Trump to protect Christians or to help Christians out. So that's I don't think so. And I know a lot of people think so. Oh yeah, he's holding back the evil. I'm like, nah, not really. No. I don't think so.
Our alliances in the Gulf. So basically, what the Israelis have forced us into, it has cost us enough. And so, if we don't get more proactive right now about restraining the Israelis,
I've been playing it. Go back last night,
and especially pertaining to what they do with Iran, we are going to continue to get sucked into these conflicts, or at least refereeing these conflicts, paying for these conflicts, because we're paying for everything that Israel is doing, essentially militarily.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, because you've actually argued that supporting Israel and putting America first are not mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. Do you still feel that way?
We need a reset, but I think in general, yes. In general, I think we can have a good relationship with Israel, but we need to reset that balance. Okay. It's way off balance right now.
Well, understood. My question was for voters watching at home who see billions of dollars flowing overseas while Americans struggle here in our own country. Yeah. How do you reconcile those two positions?
You can't. That's the problem. I mean, we twist ourselves into knots here in Washington, D.C., explaining to the American people, well, it's really complicated. We have to support Israel because of intelligence, and we have to support Ukraine because of Russia, Putin, NATO. And your average American's like, man, I can't afford to fill up the tank. Why are we sending all this money overseas? They're smart enough, and they have enough common sense to say, like, I don't see any Iranians or Russians beating down our border right now. Like, why do we need to spend billions and billions on this? And that is a great point. So I think in general, like, we've got to rein in our foreign aid. But especially for countries that are costing us more, that are getting us into more conflicts like Israel, that's probably the first place for us to start.
It has been shocking to me to realize how radioactive the topic of Israel is. Yeah. Shocking.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have lost thousands of followers over the last month, even just by hosting debates where we're debating the issue of our relationship with Israel. And I want to ask you, do you think that the accusation of anti-Semitism is used to shut down legitimate debate about our foreign policy with Israel?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And I think it's boomeranging on them now, on the people who just said anyone even having this conversation is an anti-Semite, because now anti-Semite doesn't mean anything anymore. And certainly there's probably there are anti-Semites out there, right? There always have been. But now that they've called everybody, me and you having this conversation about how we got into a war with Iran, should we use foreign aid?
Right.
There is a lot of prominent people who would say, well, those two are
subscribers are going down right now as you're talking.
Right. But now it's like this, especially with the younger generation, they're going to just not believe any of this. So now it becomes the boy who cried wolf scenario, where it's almost like the whole racism thing, for the last 10, 15 years. It's like, well, that actually does mean something, and it is horrible to be
I know, Polly. I know. It's interesting. I know. Here's why I say that. So you say that's interesting. You say Trump's not working good for Christians. He's polarizing enough for them to want to do what Muslims want, and the left is welcoming Islam globally. Okay, so it's a tricky thing. So we also, America welcomes Muslims. It's not a left thing. America does, because you come here, you do. In fact, America uses the Kurds to fight battles overseas. The Kurds are Muslims. At the end of the day, they're following the same book, the same Quran as the Iranian Muslims, the IRGC. Maybe some doctrinal differences, but it's the same book. So when it comes down to what they're going to stand for, the Kurds are not going to be our friends. The Kurds are aligned to the DSA more than they are aligned to conservatives and patriots of the West. The Kurds still don't like the West. We use the Kurds for business. So we welcome Muslims here as well. It's not really a left thing that welcomes Muslims. We welcome Muslims, our nation, the government, the freedoms welcome Muslims. Freedom of religion, that welcomes Muslims. You can't do nothing about that unless you change the Constitution. Not going to happen. So there's that. You can say that's one reason why he's not for us, for Christians. Trump is for, how do you say it? I mean, he's for freedom of religion. Does that protect Christians? Yes. Does it protect Muslims? Yes. Does it protect anybody else with the title of Christianity or any other religion? Yes. That's what I think Trump is for, right? Just to be honest, Trump is also for homosexuality. People don't think he is, but he is. So if he's for Christians, how do you really say that he's for Christians if he's also for homosexuality? Right? We could look at all the quote unquote, conservative Republican people that we turn a blind eye to because they're MAGA that are homosexuals, right? A lot. We congratulate them. They're getting married. Oh, how sweet. And we want to take pictures with them because they're celebrities, right? Because they're MAGA. That isn't Christian. So it's like this weird thing that we say, oh, he's working for Christians, where I don't really think he's working for Christians per se. I think he's doing what he's doing business-wise, right? Business, yes. Brandon Straka is one, correct? Yes, and people are all right with it because he's MAGA, or because he's not as flamboyant as the Pride parades, right, or whatever. Pride parade or not, it's still, biblically speaking, still not okay. It's still not Christian, right? And so you have this weird type of thing where it looks like, and then you have the Trump's advisors around him that are not Christian whatsoever, which I think is a big part of the problem. What's going on, what's taking place, is that these people who are around him are in a witchcrafty religion trying to wrap itself around Christianity with the Apolloites and all these people. And they be doing some stuff. Right. So I think he's moving as a business person. I think he has influence around him that's trying to keep it and make it look like it's this Christianity sort of thing going on. Yes, he did the whole Roe versus Wade thing, which nobody celebrated. No Christians were celebrating for days and days off one of the biggest things. So he did do that. He's done some things that are morally right. I don't think that's a Christian thing. I think that's just taking our nation kind of back to what the basics of things were, men and women. But then at the same time, he's going to allow stuff. He's hosted homosexual events at Mar-a-Lago, and I think even the White House. I'm not sure, but definitely Mar-a-Lago. The Log Cabin Republican Party is it's the homosexual wing of the Republicans. That don't make sense. And that's a bigger thing now because of all this weirdness of Christianity and what's going on. We have Christians thinking that homosexuality is okay, Christian, and nobody speaks against it. On the real, there's only a handful of people that really speak against the homosexuality, and they're all saying they're Christian, and it's wrapped around being MAGA and conservative. So it's this weird thing going on, and that's why I say it's not. I don't care about Trump saying God. I really don't care about him talking about the big boy up in the sky, a higher power. That does not, like, I don't get excited for that. I don't say, oh yeah, Trump's pulling for the Christians. I don't. I think Christians. Here's my thought. I think Christians are more loyal and committed to Trump more than they are to the book. That's what I think, because they dismiss someone, even someone possibly like myself. They would just, and I'm not talking about you guys, but it's out there. They would dismiss someone like myself in order to stay 100% on board with Trump. So that goes to show a lot. When none of us know Trump. None of us know Trump. We know what media shows, which is social media, and we know what his own team writes for him that he repeats. That's what we know. So I guess hopefully that answers the question a little bit, Paulie. It's just I don't see the biblical values coming from him and from the heart. I see stuff that's written, but nothing from the heart. And I know every president has writers. I know every president has writers. They all have writers, right? And it'd be nice to actually have something genuine and sincere. I think when he does interviews, it's probably more sincere than when he gets up and does like a, rally per se. But no, I know he's not saved. I know he's not saved. 100%. I know he's not saved. So, yeah.
Racist, but when you call everybody a racist, like it just doesn't mean anything anymore. So.
Well, and I think it's so dangerous when we set up these mechanisms where we're not allowed to ask questions or criticize a foreign government under this guise that it's somehow bigotry to do so. I think that's incredibly dangerous. And I'm seeing a lot of that happen right now. Can someone oppose additional aid to Israel and still be accurately described as pro-Israel?
I think so, because I think the Israelis under this leadership of Benjamin Netanyahu, they have screwed themselves in the long run. I mean, right now, what you have in the White House and what you probably have in the House and the Senate, which could change here in November, it's probably the last leadership structure in America that is just going to give blind support to Israel. Just the way that the voting demographic is changing, I think you're going to see a lot of people moving away from this construct. And so if for people who truly actually care about Israel right now, I think they should be looking past, the fight they have this next week and looking long term. What do they want their long term relationship to be with America? Because they're basically pushing it off a cliff right now to get some sort of a tactical gain, to get some sort of success, maybe in Lebanon, or to keep us involved in this Iran war longer. But I think come November, I think we're going to see a major difference in the voting blocks on both sides of the aisle. And then come 2028, I think this issue is going to be front and center.
Agreed.
So let me say this to Paulie real quick. I will say this, and actually not even for Paulie, for all of us. I will say this regarding Trump and Christians. I will say that, how do I say it? I don't want to say Christians. I will say that he's probably more freedom of religion, right, than Democrats would be. I will say that. So is he fighting for Christians? I'm not going to say he's fighting for Christians. I'll say that he's fighting for the liberty of religion, because most of the people he has around him are not Christian. So, and even now that word is being so diluted nowadays because everybody is somehow Christian. Every religion, except the obvious, is somehow Christian, which does make absolutely zero sense. You got even Jehovah's Witness will say Christian. They'll say Jehovah's Witness and get out of them, but they'll start off saying Christian. Mormons to say Christian. You have all the different sects of Christian, yet and all of them are across the board. To small differences, all the way to big differences across the board, but everybody's Christian. Like, to the point, like what I said, Christians are saying that homosexuality is okay. Well, and here's what people do. People and they'll use the scriptures, they'll use the verses, and they'll say, well, God is love. God loves me. So with this stuff of the Bible coming so universalism and across the board, and people throwing out verses and scriptures and what Jesus said, what Jesus didn't say, and everybody thinking that they know the word of God without love is love. Yet there's another one, they make that one up. They just replace it with God. God is love. Yes, Reverend Gunn. Yes. It's hard with everybody's Christian. I bet you Brandon Straka would say it probably as well. I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if he would say he's Christian. I would not by any means be surprised. Now, I don't know if he has said it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Straka said that he was Christian. It wouldn't surprise me. So that's what I mean. It's like they're making it like this across the board. It doesn't even mean nothing anymore.
You split with Trump on Iran and Israel, and Trump had some feelings about that, which I'd like to get into if you don't mind.
I didn't know that, Matt.
I have a few comments I wrote down here, or his comments that I wrote down. So in response to you resigning,
yep, they do.
Trump put out a few statements, some of which were, Joe Kent was very weak on security. He said, I'm not a fan. He said, I'm not a fan of Joe Kent. He described Joe Kent as a nice guy, says he didn't know him well. Then he went on to talk about your late wife, said his wife was killed. He remarried fairly quickly. His wife was killed, and I felt very badly for him. He ran for Congress. He lost. He ran for Congress again, and he lost. I said, he's a nice guy, seemed like a very nice guy. I met him. He was pretty heartbroken, but I said, it's a shame he ran for Congress twice. Call him up, give him a job in the White House. They gave him a job in the White House, and this is what he does to me. Being a nice guy doesn't pay off too much. So you spent years supporting Donald Trump. What was it like to suddenly become the target of the same kind of public criticism that you've watched him level at other people?
I mean, I'm not going to say it's like a good time or anything, but
Right.
But when I went out the way I knew that I went out, I knew it was going to have this effect. And I knew there was lots of people who at one point in time were probably my friends that were going to come after me, either because they were legitimately mad or because it was just their job. But it comes to the territory. I needed to publicly resign because I felt the American people needed to know how we got into this war, and to hopefully, start the discussion and hopefully prevent us from getting further into this war. And I knew one of the risks was going to be making the president mad and the president saying unpleasant things about me. So it is what it is. I don't take it too personally.
Including the comments about your wife?
I mean, we all know Trump. I mean, like, he runs hot. If you piss him off, he's going to go for the throat. And that's kind of what he did. So I get it.
Yeah, that's definitely where it went. So have you spoken to him since?
No, I have not. No.
Recently?
No.
Do you think that you will?
I'd be open to it, but I don't feel like he's going to call me anytime.
You never know.
You never know. But that is the thing about being around President Trump. There are times where I think he does reach out to people who have been adversarial with him before. So I don't know. I would 100% be open to it. I mean, I want the best he's going to be the president for the next, over 2 years. So I want him to be successful, especially getting us out of this war. I want us to get out of this war. So if there's anything I can do to help with that, I'm open to it.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't discount it. I've seen more contentious comments made.
For sure.
And then he's sitting next to Barack Obama, yucking it up, and Biden yucking it up. And I think anything is possible. I am curious, while you were going through this and while you were in the process of resigning, was there anybody in the administration who ever came to you privately and expressed that they agreed with you, but couldn't say so publicly?
There were, but I don't want to name any names.
I'm not going to, I wasn't going to ask you.
No, look, the issue, of going to war with Iran, obviously, because of, we ran on the exact opposite thing. There was a lot of people in the administration who were pretty confused, and fairly, I would say, frustrated. So yeah, there was definitely folks inside that were sympathetic.
So this kind of leads us to the larger MAGA divide that's happening right now. And it's split among many different issues and factions. And I think some of them are ideological. I think some of them are generational, as you kind of alluded to earlier. Some of it seems like MAGA started off as anti-war and now is becoming increasingly more okay with being an interventionist sect of the party, whereas America First is sort of, I'd say, identifying as more as isolationist. Mm-hmm. So I guess my first question to you is the divide real? Because a lot of people are in denial about this and say there's no real divide. It's just a few people on social media, a few bad apples. There's no real divide. Where do you land on that?
I think it's very real. It's a good question to ask, though. I think whether this is it on Twitter or is it like actually out there in reality? I live a good deal outside of Washington, D.C. I still talk to a lot of people back in Washington State, was just back out there recently. And even a lot of, like, I would say folks who don't focus on foreign policy are wondering just what the heck is going on. The Iran war being the most glaring issue, but there's been so many other places where he's done a 180. Not exactly in my wheelhouse, but a lot of the Maha issues, the list goes on. So there are a lot of people out there who I think really kind of, crawled through broken glass for President Trump, who are pretty frustrated right now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it seemed like the MAGA coalition was united against the establishment. That's sort of how we started as this anti-establishment movement. And now I think people are asking themselves, has MAGA become the establishment? What are your feelings about that?
We have become the establishment. It's a huge problem. A lot of the key declassifications and bringing people and issues to justice that we were supposed to pursue were basically blocked once we got in here. There was a lot of people who did a good job while we were on the outside of pointing out how the deep state was weaponized against the American people. But the second we got in, the handful of us who were trying to go after those were blocked from doing so. And basically it was just like, was this just a talking point? Because to a lot of us it wasn't, but apparently now that we're in charge, we're going to tell everybody just, hey, be quiet and don't worry about that. I think it's something that people should continue to call attention to.
Well, you spoke a moment ago about the younger voting base, and I completely agree with you about that. And a lot of my following and my supporters have been older people. I think if you're a conservative influencer, there's a good chance a significant portion of your audience is going to be older people. And it's been a little frustrating for me because I've been trying to explain to this portion of my audience that I believe the divide is very real. And I think it's more significant than they believe that it is. And I do believe a lot of this divide is people definitely under 30, under 40, and probably even under 50, I think, but certainly under 30. I mean, honestly, if you look at the results of Thomas Massey's primary,
100%.
That to me tells it's a very telling story. So I guess the question is, what do you see happening in November?
Well, no, I think November's gonna be rough. Just to be honest. I mean, midterms are hard anyways, because you don't have the president at the top of the ticket. So number one, that already works in the disadvantage of any president. But then number two, I think a lot of people who were really inspired to vote for President Trump in 2024, they were already low propensity voters who probably don't participate in, primaries, they don't participate in midterms. Like, to get them to come out now because, Trump endorsed somebody or because they have an R next to their name, I just think that's going to be a very, very hard sell.
Well, I think so too. And I think that these primaries have been a little deceptive, I think, for a lot of people, because I keep hearing that that's proof that nothing is wrong with MAGA and everything is alive and well. I think the real tale is going to be told in November.
I do too.
And the thing I'm questioning more than anything is, are those voters under 50, under 40, under 30 going to turn out? Or the independents, the broader coalition, are they going to show up for MAGA? Because I think a lot of people are feeling betrayed.
I think so too.
You do?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Can MAGA survive after Trump?
Nope.
I mean, it probably rebrand. I mean, Trump is pretty unique. I think a lot of his voters, and this is why you're seeing the people who are now supporting the war. I don't think it's necessarily they supported the war. You've got your hawks in there that have always supported the regime change, but most of them hated Trump anyways. And they're now, when the MOU came up, they all went back to hating Trump for, 10, 15 minutes until he did some strikes again. But the majority of people who I think are like air quotes supporting the war, they love Donald Trump for all the obvious reasons, because he's a once in a generation, political leader. So I think MAGA would kind of fracture anyways. But now, because of the way the administration has comported itself over the last almost 2 years now, the coalition is going to be very, very fragmented. But I do think the things that President Trump built the coalition on, they're pretty common sense and they do resonate with most people. So if we can get a leader that can have the credibility to run on those issues in 2028, I do think we can salvage a good deal of the coalition.
Do you think after we get through the midterms and looking to 2028, there's going to be an internal battle within the movement, MAGA versus America First? And do you see that happening along generational lines?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I think it's mostly generational, although there are some, there's some base boomers out there, that they do see it. But I think it's going to be MAGA versus America First, or whatever the new labels become. I think an establishment candidate will get put forward. Everyone says it's going to be Rubio. Who knows? I don't know, but it's going to be someone like that who's going to try and lean into what Trump has kind of become. And then you're going to have somebody else or a handful of somebody else's come and basically say like, MAGA, but I mean at this time, like America First, but we mean at this time. The credibility issue is going to be hard, because one of my big concerns is that we had so many, low propensity voters, people who never voted before, younger people who came out and voted for President Trump, and then they feel like they've been betrayed, and they have good reason to feel that way. Now they're going to say, I don't care. I don't even want to hear it. Like, they're going to be like, that's great. Joe and Brandon had a podcast and they talked about this stuff, but like, I'm not voting. I hear that a lot of times.
I do too.
From younger people. So that's actually my big fear.
Yeah. Well, and you said base boomers a second ago. And conversely, there are a lot of young people who are firmly behind President Trump, but I hear that as well. Sure. So, those two things are not exclusive. It'll be, we'll learn the lesson in November.
We will.
I guess
we will.
That'll tell the
Yes,
tale.
we will.
All right. So I want to ask you about the whole concept of the deep state and talk about surveillance. So I'm going to ask you the hard question I've asked many, many people.
Oh my goodness.
Never really gotten like the solid answer. So I'm not necessarily expecting it, but give it your best.
So November is going to be very interesting, because there are people like that. And here's the thing. I was thinking why they were talking about this. Trump provided something to people like myself and others, where I'm not even on their level. But he provided I'm not even going to say Trump did, but he did. But he didn't. People were able to become celebrities, stars, influencers under Trump. Like, honestly, you're looking at one right here doing a show. You have Tatum, you have Harris, you have the Hodge twins, you have Kirk. You have all these people that became celebrities. Where under any other president in time, nobody was. Who became, even on the left, who became a celebrity under Obama? I don't know. Maybe there was some. I don't know. And again, the social media level of YouTube and all these things weren't there in 2013, 12, 11, 10. They weren't there. Nobody became big off of Bush. Who came big off of Bush? Back then during Bush, it was Rush Limbaugh. That was it. Alex Jones. And nobody liked him. Everybody thought it was crazy. Some people still do think he's crazy. But that's who it was. It was Rush Limbaugh, Alex Jones. Was the conservative, the speakers, the voices. So Trump and social media provided this thing where now nobodies become somebodies and are seen right next to Trump. The average person, myself, right? Candace Owens. And you all, people, made these people huge, like huge, shared it out, got to listen, or this clip, or however they went viral and however they became big. So Trump provided that because everybody was so MAGA, back in 2020, I mean, in some areas, I feel like 2020 time, 19, 20, 21 was bigger for me personally with my platforms than it is now. Just to be honest, right? I was monetized heavily on Facebook, and I kind of probably ruined that on my own just by being, ignorant, stupid, posting something I probably shouldn't have posted, and I knew, but I was like, get away with it, whatever, and things like that, but yeah, so Trump provided, once you start getting noticed by the White House, and the White House is retweeting your stuff, and Trump's retweeting your stuff, and things like that, it's a big deal. But then again, you have Bryson Gray, who was getting ready to be used by Trump at all the rallies, and he's like, I got to put Christ first. Went through a series of things, and he still has his platform, but it's not as maybe big as it once was because he's not pushing all the quote unquote MAGA music, which is another point. MAGA is like it's so weird because people go so hard for Trump and MAGA, and not that hard for Christ. It's like they put MAGA and Trump over Christ, and then you go to call it out, and people are like, "No, I don't put it's Jesus over Trump." No, it really is not. It really isn't. It's nice to say. Of course, you don't want to say. Oh, it's Trump over Jesus. Of course, that doesn't even sound right. But when it comes down to behavior and actions, it's like, yeah, 100% it's Trump over Jesus. Kimberly, thank you for the super chat. Hey, buddy, the day you Bruce Jenner, I will never forget. Yeah, that was a fun event. That was fun. Thank you for the super chat. I do remember that day. No matter how hard they try, I will not return Trump's calls. We're still not speaking on speaking terms. Yeah, it is what it is.
Shot. Is there a deep state? And if so, who or what is it?
There's 100% a deep state.
Who or what is it?
So there's multiple layers to it. So I think your average deep state is just the obvious. It's a bureaucracy, and their whole job is to endure the different administrations and to keep their jobs and to keep money flowing to their jobs. And a lot of times just understanding that mechanism can explain how things that are bad or work against the American people continue, because when money flows in Washington, D.C., it creates jobs, it creates a whole cottage industry. It's hard to shut off. Now, there is a much more nefarious deep state. I mean, I'm glad just yesterday, Anna Paulina Luna and Tim Burchett did that hearing, that public hearing on MK Ultra. There's been a lot of exposure over the years of the things that the dark corners of our government has gotten into, where the intelligence community and law enforcement have been weaponized against American citizens for a wide variety of reasons. Again, some of it is just because they feel that they need to make their organization look good. So it's easier to get a conviction of an innocent man than it is to do the hard work of figuring out what happened. But then a lot of it is much more nefarious than that, because intelligence agencies at the end of the day, and secrecy at the end of the day, human nature will have it be manipulated for the people who hold the secrets and who hold the levers of power, either to install who they want to be in charge or to control the folks in charge. And so I think if we're not clear-eyed about that, then I think we're going to fall prey to it. And I think in many ways we have fallen prey to that in our government.
So is your definition of deep state, is it a combination of DC careers and donors, and what is the mechanism?
So yes, I mean, that's the mechanism for the first layer of the deep state.
Yeah.
I would say, but the what's more murky, which is much more hard to define unless we see it bear itself in certain places, like a high profile assassination. That's taking place with basically the black budget. And, these things aren't being planned necessarily at the Hoover building or at Langley themselves. There's different cutouts, there's different mechanisms that are used. And if we're able to get into a lot of the black budget components, we would be able to figure out where a lot of this money is going.
What is black budget?
So black budget is basically the money that's used to run the intelligence community. Because
Okay.
if the intelligence community's budget was known, then our adversaries could say, okay, we have a general idea of what America's capabilities are. So a lot of it, for good reason, is kept secret. But if there's not proper oversight of that black budget and understanding exactly where that money is going in different programs that it could be used for, then they can just kind of run unaccountable to the American people. And in many cases, a lot of the directors who are political appointees won't even necessarily know what's going on.
Is there any hope of eradicating a deep state, and can it be done through voting and elections?
Yes, but you need people who are serious to come in and who, two things. Number one, they can't fall in love with the institutions. These institutions do a very, very good job because most of them are very storied. And we do a good job in America. I fell for it. I joined the Army when I was 18 of loving our institutions. But we need people who come in with a healthy skepticism of them and are willing to go to war essentially with the inner workings of the bureaucracy and not be captured on day one by it because they've been given a title and they have a personal assistant and they get driven around. And that organization that at one point in time they were going after now says, hey, you're the greatest guy ever. We have to fight that. And we have to put people in those positions who they have the personality and the temperament to know that's not their job, and the leadership at the top, the president, to say, I have your back, political appointees, and I want you to go to war with these different organizations and different apparatuses. Now, the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence,
Thank you, Kimberly, for the $2 super chat. I remember when Fox News would not say Soros. I don't remember that. I know they didn't like to really talk about him, so maybe I guess they wouldn't say him. They wouldn't say it, so probably right. Oh, that's politely. Thank you, Kimberly, for the super chat. I appreciate it. God bless you. Thank you.
position was created after 9/11, basically to oversee the entire intelligence community. And it's my strong opinion that Tulsi Gabbard was the first DNI that actually attempted to enact what the DNI was supposed to do and have oversight, to go to the CIA and say, show me all your covert actions, show me your black budget, to go to the NSA and say, like, how did you collect that information? Like, are you violating American civil liberties? And to do that across the board with the IC. That's why she didn't make any friends in Washington, D.C. That's why a lot of us who came in at ODNI with Tulsi didn't make a lot of friends in Washington, D.C. So it's got to be a mission, and we have to have the right people who have the right amount of knowledge of the apparatus, but who are willing to go to war with it. This is why, I mean, this goes back to General Flynn, too. This is why Washington, D.C. was terrified of Mike Flynn, because of the things that he was saying and the experiences that he had. He wasn't saying things that other people hadn't said before, but his skepticism of the deep state, of the national security apparatus, but then his knowledge from being, the head of intelligence at Joint Special Operations, the head of DIA, and then being the president's national security advisor, they had to go and take him out, and they used deep state tactics to do it.
Yep. So I recently did an interview with a man named John Gross, who was working at DOJ for about a year. He was a really good guy who actually had a desire and a passion to go in and see the DOJ be de-weaponized and, the FBI, and ended up resigning because he feels it's just not happening at all. And for a lot of the reasons that you just said, that a lot of people get in there and almost become sort of seduced by the position and the access and the power and all of those things. And he made, I think, a really strong point when he was, during the interview that I did with him, kind of a plea to President Trump, saying, President Trump, the next attorney general should be, first of all, somebody who is not looking to be famous, not looking to be on television, not looking to build a career, but perhaps most importantly, he felt like somebody at the end of their career who isn't looking to use it as a stepping stone to the next thing, and also perhaps doesn't really care necessarily if they try to come after this person and destroy their career, because that'll happen too. Obviously, if you go in and try to dismantle these institutions, they're going to try to destroy that person. So who gets put into these positions is obviously incredibly important. And I think that's been really disappointing to a lot of people right now, some of the choices that have been made.
Yeah.
Matt, Friendly Music, thank you very much for the $20 super chat. Good stuff tonight, sir. I'm glad you're liking it. And I will play another eschatology one tomorrow or Wednesday. The part 3 from the other 2 I played. I played one last Thursday. I played another one last night. So I'll probably do it tomorrow. or Wednesday for sure. If not tomorrow, Wednesday for sure. So you don't want to miss it. So, and then go back and check those other ones out too. But appreciate it, man. God bless you. Thank you. And thanks for being here.
I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who made a good living on the outside saying these are the things that are wrong with those organizations. And the second they got put in charge, those organizations handled them and said, like, you're the man, you're our guy now. And that, I think, really squashed the appetite to go after them in a very meaningful way. And so I agree with that theory of the case, that we need people who are maybe at the end of their careers or have no desire to make a career in DC or do politics, that go in there with a single-minded focus that we're going to go after the rot, we're going to go after the deep state, we're going to get accountability for the American people. But they've got to have the top cover from the president, because if the president isn't right there with them every step of the way, the apparatus will destroy them. It'll probably intimidate them before it destroys them, but it has the ability to destroy them.
Do you have an opinion about flock cameras?
Yeah, it's pretty dangerous. I mean, incredibly dangerous. Like, this is Chinese, the Chinese surveillance
Flock
state
cameras,
coming
y'all,
here with a different name and brand.
If FISA is abused, flock cameras are expanding, financial transactions are monitored, social media.
Flock cameras.
So Republicans have spent years warning that about government overreach.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like surveillance technology continues to expand under both parties. So is
you know why it continues to expand under both parties? Because for one, everybody turns a blind eye to the one person that we all voted for, right? That came in and said, hey, on the second day of me being in office, I want to sign this piece of paper that says I'm going to give $500 billion for data centers and AI. And we're like, yeah, go Trump. Yeah. Like, how many red flag was that? Like, what did you just do, bro? Second day in office, and this is what it's because he needs to compete against China. And if we don't do it, then China's going to rule us. All right. So let's just sell ourselves to the devil because of China. Sounds great.
Does the surveillance state have bipartisan support?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think most the conflicts you see over the surveillance state or a FISA, it's like kind of play acting, unless you're talking about like Massey or a few other, random folks out there who've been consistent. Rand Paul, they've been consistent on it. But by and large, it is a bipartisan apparatus.
So if FISA is abused, flock cameras are expanding, financial transactions are monitored, social media is tracked, AI is being deployed by government agencies, what freedom should Americans feel like they're gaining?
They're not gaining any freedoms. I mean, their freedoms are being taken away.
Right.
100%. And look, there's always going to be a give and take in a country that has enemies that we need to keep safe, et cetera, where there are going to need to be tools of the surveillance state, but that's high trust. And what has our government done in the last 10, 20 years to build that trust with the American people? People ask me about FISA all the time, and I'm happy to talk about FISA. The problem with FISA isn't necessarily any of the details within any of the FISA legislation. The problem is that no one's been held accountable when they abused FISA. Right. So you could pass all the laws that you want. You could pass it. You could not pass it. You could say get a warrant, don't get a warrant. The guys at the NSA and throughout the IC, they still have the tools, and very few, if any, people have ever significantly been punished when it was weaponized. Even the most egregious cases, even the cases where it was weaponized against the president, against General Flynn, et cetera, no one's actually been held accountable or punished for it. So really, until we start holding people accountable for those abuses, they're going to continue to abuse because there's no incentive for them not to.
Do you have an opinion about flock cameras?
Yeah, it's pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, incredibly dangerous. Like, this is Chinese, the Chinese surveillance state coming here with a different name and brand.
Well, yep. That's exactly what I was about to bring up. But tell me more about that.
I mean, look, the AI, all the different technologies that are out there that are being meshed together, and a lot of it is just, for profit. However, that can be weaponized. That has been and will be weaponized by the intelligence community, whether we like it or not. And we can say, hey, the guys that are in charge of the intelligence community right now, they're on my team. The question isn't like, is the guy on my team or not? It's, do we want the federal government or even state governments to have this much access to us? At what point does it violate our civil liberties? I do tell you guys how I feel. And the constant persistent surveillance from flock cameras, the way our cell phones are tracked, the way our metadata is tracked, everything that we do online. Now, obviously we are participating in that when it is online, but the society has become so digital now that it's impossible not to be online. So for me, and any American citizen, I think we have to be very, very wary of this growing surveillance state. And if we don't start looking at ways right now where we can limit it and we can restrict it, it's going to just grow out of control in a way that we can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Well, I've tried.
Thank you, Kimberly. Did you hear about Fushi Dairies being released? He is on trial tomorrow. Who is that? No, I did not hear about that person. No, I did not. Who is it? I don't know who it is. Who is it? Fushi Diary? What? Personal journal kit. No, I don't know who it is. I do not know who it is. Sorry. Don't know. I'll look into it, though. I'll look into it.
Traveled around the country for
Thank
years
you for
doing
the,
public
super
speaking
chat.
in states all across the country. And people ask me all the time, it's almost, I think some people almost think you're being overly paranoid if you say things like, Chinese credit scores, could that ever come to the United States? And I say, look at what happened to me and so many other people. When we'll get into January 6th in a little bit because I want to hear your opinions on that. But for those of us who were selected to be prosecuted for January 6th, I say it that way because I maintain I did not commit a crime on January 6th. That was used as an excuse for them to not only surveil our social media and our emails and to go through every aspect, to raid our homes and take our devices and go through our text messages and everything. But then it was also used as a reason to deplatform us, debank us, prevent us from using PayPal and Venmo, sending and receiving money. I mean, it was hardcore in a way that even I think most people to this day don't realize. Because the other thing about January 6th is that it was not very well covered. Even the conservative media really didn't want to touch it. So a lot of people, and I'm sure you're aware that most of us were put on the Quad S list, making it almost impossible to be able to travel. And it was so. Those things have already happened to Americans. And with an increase of a surveillance state, I think it's very frightening what could happen to anybody. You don't have to have gone to the Capitol on January 6th to have the government come after you if they have this kind of access to tracking you and your information.
100%. And I think most Americans would assume that none of that would happen unless I got a fair trial because they believe in the system, et cetera. But all of this is extrajudicial. All of this can be done to you, not just by private corporations, but the government can just do it freely whenever they want to. And then before you even get your day in trial, the process like that you went through that you just described, that becomes the actual punishment. And then if you just look at all the ways your civil liberties were violated in the course of that, that's what we're sacrificing without even knowing. We're just kind of blindly marching off towards it. And I think one of the good things about the country being so polarized is that if we distrust each other enough on different sides of the aisle, we should both be like, well, I don't want the other team to get this capability. So like I would say to the Democrats who are for this, it's like, well, you don't want President Trump to have it. And like if you're a Republican that's now cheering on the national security state because we're in charge, like, do you want President, Gavin Newsom or President AOC to have this? No, we don't. So let's just safeguard against it now while we can.
100%. What do you think is the most dangerous surveillance technology that nobody's talking about or people aren't paying close enough attention to?
I think the flock right now, because people are aware, I think, of their phones and the internet because that's been the hot button issue for so long. They probably still don't realize how much AI is now being implemented to basically profile your personality, which most of that stuff is incredibly creepy. But that technology is advancing at a really fast rate. But I think because surveillance cameras have been up and around and people are more used to seeing them, I don't think they understand what the flock system is and how AI combined with everything on your phone, how all that can be meshed into the same system. I think a lot of people will see a flock camera and they'll be like, well, that's like, going to go to the sheriff department to make sure I'm not speeding or something like that. They don't understand how combined this whole thing is to basically surveil you as a private citizen at any given time.
Can you explain it a little bit for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, I'm going to do my best. It's a network throughout the country that's being set up basically right now in public spaces, but also some private properties as well with the consent of the property owners. But it's meshed in a way that's going to go into centralized databases, then advanced AI tools can then use it to rapidly find where Joe Kent is at any given time because they caught a glimpse of my image somewhere. I think that's probably a pretty rudimentary way of describing it. But if you combine that surveillance technology with what takes place digitally with our phones, combined with AI, we're approaching a point where there would be tools available to say like, well, I think it looks like Joe is displaying the indicators of someone who's going to go commit a crime. Stuff that used to be in science fiction movies, several years ago, Minority Report, et cetera. That's the type of technology that we're leaning more towards with technologies like FLOT combined with what already exists in the digital space.
But aren't we told that the information is not available to federal agents, and also that they're just you're laughing, that they're just tracking license plate? I mean, that's what we're told.
That's what we're told, yeah. And I'm sure there's a whole group of people out there who are just like, no, I'm the guy who monitors the database to make sure it's only license plates, but it's still a database. It's still out there. It can still be hacked into. It can still be accessed. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about with like the FISA 702 issue. It's like, you can make all the prohibitions against different uses of FISA, et cetera. The capability still exists. And so once the capability exists, it can and will be weaponized. If we've learned anything over the last 10, 20 years, if the government has a capability, at some point, if there's not safeguards put in there and people aren't held accountable, that capability will be used against you.
Okay. Yep. Let's switch gears for a second and talk about the border. Yeah. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a cynical question.
Sure.
It's only because I don't trust anybody anymore on any side of the aisle. I just feel like we're constantly being given narratives to make us either feel really afraid or to make us feel placated. And I don't know what's true and what's not. So let's start with
Tia. Thank you for the $10 Venmo. Thank you for the $10 Venmo, Tia. Appreciate it so much. God bless you. Thank you.
Right now, today, is the border truly secured?
Well, I think, yes, it's as secure as it's going to be, really.
Yeah.
Or I should say more secure than it was under the Biden administration. Now,
well, that's
exactly right. Okay. So I think we could be doing more to secure it. I think if we didn't have troops spread out throughout the entire world, we could militarize our border. And I think we should. We have every reason to do that. Definitely on the southern border, to a less degree on the northern border. I think it's mostly secure right now. So a lot of the egregious, the caravans coming across, that has stopped. But the flow of, fentanyl and a lot of the cartel activity, that hasn't stopped because they're using sophisticated systems. The fentanyl is a different issue because there's demand for it here in America. But overall, I don't think it's hyperbolic to say the border's secure, just knowing that most things can never truly be secured.
Okay, well, because that's definitely what we're told now. There was a border crisis under Biden, and that has been stopped under Trump. And and I'm not denying that. I wanted to know if you agree that that's mostly true. I mean, obviously, we're never going to be able to 100% ironclad protect, but given the 10 to 15 million people or more came into our country illegally under Biden. I did the math last night. We would have to deport 15,000 people a day for the rest of Trump's term to be able to deport all of those illegal migrants to our country. Is there a realistic solution to deporting illegal immigrants?
Oh, I think there is. The problem is bandwidth and what the president chooses to spend his time on. And unfortunately, we've spent our time on foreign adventures, whether it was the initial war with the Houthis or whether it's this Iran saga that has now drug on for over a year in some way, shape, or form. Something that was eye-opening for me being at the White House is it's actually, at the end of the day, it's a very small shop, regardless of how many people you cram in there. And the administration, they're going to claim all day long they can walk and chew gum at the same time. They're humans. And when the crisis of the day happens and a place where they have to expend resources and political capital, that's where the focus is going to go. And for this administration, unfortunately, the focus has gone towards the CENTCOM AOR. It's gone towards the Houthis. It's gone towards Iran. We've been stuck in the Iran cycle for a year. In order to do mass deportations, we would have had to come in on day one and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to prioritize the worst of the worst and then work our way on down the list. And this is where the president is going to spend most of his attention, and he's willing to sacrifice some political capital. So it's got to be done in a very, very deliberate way. And you got to hit hard and fast. If we would have hit so hard and so fast, I think he could have stayed ahead of a lot of the judges. And I think he'd even have to be willing to, press the limits of his power a little bit in a certain degree. And again, that's the political capital. So I think most of the base would have much rather the president expend his political capital trying to deport the illegals that came into our country rather than this war in Iran, which most people can't see the value of.
For sure.
He's on point. He's on point.
Well, he would have to do a massive U-turn of a very big ship. So I think right now,
Can't do it
in the near future. It's too late. Now, maybe after the midterms, if he says like, wow, I got to get out of the Middle East and we just need to focus on this. This is the only thing I want to do.
It was a promise.
I think he's got to get very, very deliberate about that. Another reason the administration hasn't done a good job
of
explaining this. People are
that
frustrated
crazy?
with low deportation numbers. All of us are.
Hold on. Isn't that crazy? So 2 promises that he told us, and they both got flipped. So the 2 promises went like and flipped. One was the mass deportations, and it went the other way, right? And the other was no war, and it went the other way. So mass deportations went to the left. Yes, that's what happened. And then we went from no war to yes, we're in war. Yeah. No, Kimberly, it has nothing to do with Congress. The mass deportations has nothing to do with Congress. I promise you that. That I do know for a fact. Has nothing to do with Congress.
The Biden administration and the Democrats were diabolically clever when they did the invasion. They didn't just open up the border. They did that, but they were very, very deliberate about giving most people who came across the border illegal status. And once a lot of these people have been given a legal status, they're technically not illegal immigrants anymore. And so even though we want to grab them and deport them, technically right now, that's very, very hard to do. So again, this is political capital. The president would have to come in day one and just started doing so many executive orders, just saying like anybody who was given a legal asylum status or parole in place status that under the Biden administration hereby rescinded, let it go to the courts. But while the courts are fighting it out, he had people that were out there locating those individuals and deporting them before the courts could even say anything, and setting up the apparatus in third countries that would actually take a lot of these people, because a lot of the countries of origin won't take them back, or we can't send them back.
Yeah, we can't send them
so
back.
Again, it really came down to, were we going to prioritize this? And from my vantage point, I don't think we ever had a serious plan to go after and do the mass deportations.
Why?
That I don't know. I think maybe the president was told this is going to be super easy, and these hard issues weren't brought to him. I for the life of me, I don't know. It seemed like there was a concerted effort for the Israel Iran war lobby to come in there and pitch the president constantly. But when you've got guys who have a lot of experience at deportations and border security, et cetera, they didn't seem to be floating to the top of the agenda for the president, unfortunately.
Do you think people are just telling him things that he's believing that aren't true, or that he's getting information? Is he on top of what's actually going on? I said the Supreme Court decided this week that birthright citizenship would stand for anybody born in the U.S., even if their parents came into our country illegally. What national security concerns do you see this episodes in the future? Is he on top of what's actually going on?
I mean, it's almost impossible for a president to be on top of everything, just because
and I understand that
the portfolio is so big. But at this point where he's got so much data, like at first I really felt like he was deceived in the Iran war, but now he's got so much data that he should be able to say, like, the guys that got me into this, I should stop listening to them and correct course. Same thing with me, mass deportations. I mean, he ran on mass deportations, and now, he's getting stymied by, governors and just by a lack of momentum. He should be looking at bringing in new people to focus on that portfolio, because obviously the results just aren't there.
To what degree do you think Americans should be concerned about bad actors coming over the border, whether it's Chinese spies or terrorists?
I think you should be very concerned. I mean, Biden let in millions, and we don't know who a lot of these people are. At the National Counterterrorism Center,
the mass deportation thing has nothing to do. The mass deportation, it got stopped. The reason why, how can I say it? So the mass deportation thing that came to a halt and stopped the way it did has nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans. It has nothing to do with Republicans or Congress or the House or anybody pushing back against him in a political bigger realm sort of thing. It has nothing to do with that. It more has to do with us, we the people, meaning as Americans, all of us, and business. It has nothing to do with like a political, maybe concerned about the voting elections.
The first day, actually, I came into ODNI, I had people from NCTC come to me, and they were giving me, lists of thousands of people who were in the country who they had flagged under the Biden administration for having ties. They weren't confirmed terrorists, but they had ties to terrorist organizations, and they recommended the Biden administration not let them in, but they did indeed let them in the country. Some of them could have left, but a lot of them were still here. So I do think people not have an unhealthy fear or anything, don't stop living your lives, but we had an open border. We had basically no immigration policy. So to think that some of our adversaries and terrorist organizations wouldn't exploit that, of course they would. And you're getting a lot of people here too, who may not have come across the border with the intention of like, I'm going to be an Al-Qaeda operative or whatever, but they become disenfranchised when they get here and they're susceptible to propaganda. And those are a lot of the pools that are recruited from, or they self-radicalize when they get here.
So yesterday we had a bit of a bomb dropped by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I wrote this question last night, so it probably drips with a little bit of spite and resentment, but I'll just read it as I wrote it. I said, the Supreme Court decided this week that birthright citizenship would stand for anybody born in the U.S., even if their parents came into our country illegally. What national security concerns do you see this opening up?
I mean, the obvious ones. I mean, we just incentivized anchor babies. We incentivized people to come here who have no allegiance, who have not been vetted to have a kid, and then the kid will be a citizen, and then we know we're not going to deport the parent. I mean, I saw some people pointing out, like it says, the American citizen can't sponsor their parents or family members till they're 21, but we're not going to deport the parents. Everyone knows that, and so we've just opened up Pandora's box. Basically, all the folks who came in under Biden's invasion, who we should have been diligently deporting, like we just talked about over the course of the last year and a half, they now know, the clearest pathway to citizenship is having a kid here. And then we're not getting deported. And then now you're going to have all these kids that were born here by parents who didn't even take step one of respecting our country by coming in the right way. They're going to be born here. They're going to have all the rights and protections that you and I have. They're going to be American citizens that can travel the world, passport, et cetera.
Right.
We're going to be responsible for them. It's basically, I mean, I don't want to be over dramatic, but over the course of a generation or two, this is basically the death of the country. You can't allow your nation to be flooded with foreigners who have no allegiance to your nation. That's just common sense.
Well, and that was, I believe it was Justice Alito's dissent. That's sort of what he got into. Yeah. And I thought it was sort of chilling because he was essentially saying adversaries to the United States could come here, have children. Those children become citizens. They leave. They aren't even raised in our country. They're radicalized in another country against America. And then they're able to come back as citizens to our country and do whatever. And there's really nothing that we can do about that.
Yeah. And again, to think that all of our adversaries wouldn't be just licking their chops right now and coming up with their plan, how they're going to get people over here to have kids to give them citizenship, and then either do what Alito outlined and bring them back home and raise them, in that country, then send them back to America, or just have them basically raised here on the taxpayer dollar and destroy our nation that way. I mean, it's unbelievable. I hope that there's a fix. I believe Congress is going to try and come up with a fix. I hope that's successful. But again, I think this is a place where the mass deportations, had we been doing that 15 or anything close to that 15,000 persons per day number, we'd at least be stopping the bleeding to a certain extent. But now the problem just seems so immense.
Can't do it.
Let me ask you about January 6th.
Yeah.
Did January 6th change the way that the intelligence community thinks about domestic threats?
Well, yeah, certainly under the Biden administration, it did, because it branded all of us as threats. But like, I think what we need to focus on is that January 6th happened when President Trump was still the president, when we still technically had our team, for lack of a better term, in charge of the FBI, the Capitol Police, et cetera. So that's that deep state that we were talking about. In my view, there was a concerted effort, at least to entrap Americans, to enhance the criminal acuity of folks in the crowd, in order to launch what I believe was a planned information operation to say that everybody that's associated with President Trump is a criminal, but also President Trump can't contest this election, and then he can't run for office again. That was deliberate. I don't think that this was a case of like, never let a crisis go to waste. I believe that there was a lot of pre-planning by elements of the deep state that went into January 6th.
Do you think that the public's trust in the FBI and the intelligence communities has recovered now that President Trump's administration is in, or do you think that the trust is still broken?
That's the MAGA divide right now.
Yes, it is.
I think the America First types are just like, we haven't seen any reform.
Right.
The loyalists are fine with the 3-letter agencies because they think that Trump is controlling it, and they think that these people are under Trump. That's why everybody's all right with ICE and all this type of stuff. And I'm not speaking against ICE, but ICE is still FBI and feds and all this type of jazz. So people are okay with it because it's under Trump, right? If it was under Biden or the Democrat, then people would be mad at the feds. Although the feds just obey and do what they're told. So once the feds start coming for conservatives at whatever point that is, if they do, then people are going to be mad at the feds. Oh, we don't like the feds. Well, why were you liking them during Trump? Oh, it's because it was under Trump. It's like they're an agency that obeys orders, like they're military-ish. So it's, again, the mega divide thing.
We've seen some like kind of hinting around, but there's been no real accountability. The pardons were great. I'm glad everyone got a pardon that was involved in January 6th. I think that was the right thing to do. There's been like minor disclosures, but most of those have happened, I think, because of diligent journalists submitting FOIAs, not because we actually got to the bottom of what took place on January 6th. I know from our vantage point, from ODNI, when we came in and we started asking hard questions of DOJ and FBI, we were blocked and told to stop looking into it, essentially, or, they just didn't answer us. So I don't think, for the majority of people who are following the news, who have stayed with this topic, I don't think they have any more faith in the FBI and the intelligence community. But again, you do have that faction of Trump's base that's very loyal to him, that's going to say like, well, everything's been fixed because Trump's in charge.
Or it's happening. It is happening. Yeah. It's happening behind the scenes. Be patient. Stop being a doomer.
Right. Trust the plan. Yeah.
Right.
Trust the plan.
Stop being a pannekin. I get that a lot. Looking back now, what do you believe the federal government got right and got wrong in its response to January 6th?
Well, I mean, right from the deep state perspective, their plan basically worked out. I mean, they were able to run a soft color revolution, essentially. They used the color revolution playbook. They used a protest. They inserted their agitators, and then they were able to drive the narrative based on that. I do think because of citizen journalists, because of basically the internet, social media, I do think we, the people, got a much better look at that and how that's been employed. It's probably been employed against us before. But at the time when there was only like a handful of newspapers and TV stations, like they got away with it.
Yep.
In this case, I don't think they got away with it fully. There hasn't been enough accountability by any means, and we still don't know the exact full story. But I think we know much more now. But again, the deep state's plan still worked. So I think the government learned that they can continue to shape and craft a narrative, and they can operate almost without impunity. I mean, people got pardons, but there hasn't really been any real restitution necessarily.
No, I agree.
Done to the people who had their lives ruined by January 6th. And again, there's been no accountability. We still don't fully know. We have a general idea of some of the actors who were responsible for January 6th, but we still don't definitively know because there's been no actual concerted effort by the Trump administration to go in there and say, we are going to go after these people. We are going to get justice. And we're going to make sure whatever apparatus it was that created this color revolution situation, because it's huge. I mean, it's beyond, I mean, what happened to you is horrible. What happened to all the people on J6 is horrible. But I would love to have the president reflect on like what this means. Like this was an effort to take him out, a duly elected president, and it ties into everything. It ties into our election system, and it ties into his ability to run for office again. So again, we haven't had any accountability, and we still don't have any answers.
Okay, so do you think it's just like a sense of embarrassment? Do you think what is it that's preventing that from happening? Because I would have thought it would have been one of the most important things to President Trump. Number one, not only because I would argue whether anybody thinks that people did right or wrong on January 6th, and there were, I think my opinion is the majority of people were people who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And some of them may have walked into the Capitol through an open door. I didn't even go in the Capitol. I was outside filming for 8 minutes. And then there was a small group of people who definitely committed some acts of violence and destruction, fairly minor for the most part, but certainly that did happen. But I mean, it was turned into an insurrection and an act of domestic terrorism and this huge thing. And kind of in the name of Trump. And I would think that Trump, more than anybody, would want to correct that record and bring out the truth and hold the people accountable who created this narrative. I'm not saying that at all. So what do you think is preventing that from happening?
What do you think? I love the question. What do you guys think is preventing it from happening? like on a real level, what is preventing it from Trump from actually really going after these people? He is the president of the United States. Is it friends? Is it because he's part of the system now involved? What do you think? It's going to be interesting to hear what Joe says. Why hasn't he truly gone after these people? These people who ruin people's lives, like really ruin people's lives. I would do anything to have my job back. I mean, I wouldn't do anything, but I would do anything to have my job back. And I know that was COVID, but that was still under all this stupid stuff. Wrapped COVID together with J6. Why don't you think Trump will go out? Even if it was a deep state insurrection, why won't he go after it? Is he part of the deep state? Is that why he won't? Is he part of the swamp and that's why he won't? I mean, now there has to be a reason why he isn't. Let's hear what Joe says.
That's the question. I mean, and I don't know if it's because it's so dark he doesn't want to look there because he's fearful of the repercussions. And Trump, to a certain extent, saw the full cycle of this, right? He saw the color revolution happen he saw the stolen election happen, which resulted in January 6th, which resulted in the predicate for basically the color revolution. And then they used that to go after him with lawfare. And had the lawfare been successful, he would probably be in jail.
Yeah.
Members of his family, close supporters, they would probably be in jail right now. He'd probably be in jail for the rest of his life. That wasn't successful because he had good lawyers, and thankfully our justice system still kind of works. Well, then what happened? Well, then they tried to kill him, right? And I don't know who they is, but to say that there is no they there, I think is absurd at this point. And so he either saw all that and just doesn't even want to touch it because he was, a centimeter away from having his head blown off, essentially.
Yeah.
Or he does know what it is and he still doesn't want to touch it because he feels that now it will either come after him. I don't necessarily think that he's worried about himself at this point, but I do think he loves his family and he's got a very big family and he continues to have breaches of his own security, which we pointed out while we were in the administration, but they haven't been fixed. The same people are in charge. And so I think to a large degree, there's a possibility that he believes that he's not safe. And this is just the apparatus that controls the country. And he can either benefit from all that it can offer, or he can get killed going after
Interesting. That's interesting because I guess in my mind, I had mostly chalked it up to that that
is the deepest explanation that I've heard. Like laid out smoothly. So where you actually understand that was laid out smoothly so that you actually understand it instead of just saying, oh, they want to kill him. Because that's what you hear a lot. Oh, they just want to take him out. That was laid out smoothly. That he doesn't even want to touch it. One, because he knows who it is. All those different things that was good. That was good. Quincy, I don't know. He pardoned a lot. It's bad. And yes, they have tried to kill him and his family. That was it was a very heavy explanation. That was, I want to hear it again because that was solid.
Because he feels that now it will either come after him. Wasn't successful because he had good lawyers and had the lawfare been successful, he would probably be in jail.
Yeah.
Members of his family, close supporters, they would probably be in jail right now. He'd probably be in jail for the rest of his life. That wasn't successful because he had good lawyers and thankfully our justice system still kind of works. Well, then what happened? Well, then they tried to kill him. Right. And I don't know who they is, but to say that there is no they there, I think is absurd at this point. And so he either saw all that and just doesn't even want to touch it because he was, a centimeter away from having his head blown off, essentially.
Yeah.
Or he does know what it is and he still doesn't want to touch it because he feels that now it will either come after him. I don't necessarily think that he's worried about himself at this point, but I do think he loves his family and he's got a very big family and he continues to have breaches of his own security, which we pointed out while we were in the administration, but they haven't been fixed. The same people are in charge. And so I think to a large degree, there's a possibility that he believes that he's not safe. And this is just the apparatus that controls the country. And he can either benefit from all that it can offer, or he can get killed going after
Interesting. That's interesting because I guess in my mind, I had mostly chalked it up to that this is sort of like a stain and an embarrassment in that it doesn't feel worth it to them to drag out this investigation because it's just going to be perceived as, Trump excusing violence or Trump excusing destruction on January 6th. When in fact, I mean, you said a moment ago, so you believe that agitators were inserted into the situation and kind of created. Is that your belief?
Yeah. I mean, we know that there was at least, I think, over 20 confidential human informants just from the FBI, not to mention any other, law enforcement or intelligence agency that were there. We asked really early on in the administration to see exactly all the case files from those confidential human informants, because running sources is something I did in the CIA and in special operations. It's highly bureaucratic. So, okay, I want to see all the taskings that those guys were given. What was their instructions? What were they told to do? What groups did they infiltrate? What exactly did those individuals do on January 6th? And then we heard, hey, there was 250 FBI agents who were sent there. Now, I understand a lot of those FBI agents were told just to get there and do crowd control, but that still doesn't give me, a lot of assurances that something else didn't take place there.
Right.
And then also you do have there's ways to get people through different apparatuses the government has into the crowds to agitate these types of things. Were they given instructions that basically enhance the criminal acuity of anyone in the crowd that day? I mean, the guy that was running the Washington field office, Stephen DeAntuono, he was the guy that ran the Gretchen Whitmer case, the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping case, where the majority of the people accused of that got off because the majority involved in the plot were FBI agents or FBI undercovers. So the FBI has done these entrapment operations before. So to think that it wouldn't happen here, January 6th, I think is crazy. And there was all kinds of pre-knowledge. They knew that they knew there was going to be a protest of some kind.
Yeah.
So they had infiltrators already in the majority of the groups that were going to go participate in what was going to take place, the protest at the Capitol. And then you have the pipe bombing. There's still lots of questions there. I know that that's probably going to go to court here soon. So there's a lot there, and there's a lot of indicators strongly that there were informants and that the FBI at least, and probably the Capitol Police, which you can't FOIA, were all over this.
Yeah. Well, and to wrap up this topic, there is certainly the faction of the MAGA movement that's very, defensive of President Trump. And to them, I say, wow. They've said to me many times, "Oh, Brandon, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes," and I'm sure it's all being addressed and it's being investigated. It's simply not possible. I know it's not possible because through going through this myself, I now personally know hundreds of people who went through January 6th. Nobody has been contacted to come in for an interview. And I mean the simplest things. I mean, talking to any of us, they could start to gather information, what FBI agents were involved, what methods were used to coerce you into pleading guilty to things that you didn't do. Mm-hmm. None of these conversations have taken place. So, I mean, it simply is not possible that there is some sort of meaningful investigation into what happened on January 6th happening behind the scenes. I don't believe it. But that takes us into weaponization and de-weaponization. Yeah. So for nearly a decade, MAGA politicians have promised accountability for intelligence officials involved in Russiagate, COVID, censorship, election interference, and surveillance abuses. Why has there been so little accountability?
I mean, that's another good question. I mean, there's a lot that we found, a lot that we got into. Deanna Gabbard's released some of it, but again, this is the same question with January 6th. Like, why aren't we aggressively going after these things now that we're in charge? And the
window is closing.
People will call me a conspiracy theorist all day long, but it's like, do we just not have the guts to do it? Because I don't necessarily buy. I mean, maybe we're just being team players and we're saying this is going to be so embarrassing and maybe it's not worth the political risk. Or are we scared? Are we scared to walk through that door and to say, like, there are dark things here, everything that you outline there, because that is really, those are the power centers of the government that, decides who's elected, that decides when the economy can be locked down. So there's powerful entities that are there. There's also probably just a lot of bureaucrats that mess things up, et cetera, that are covering their rear. However, there's been no real accountability for it. And like you said, like, the window is actually closing and we've got a limited amount of time that Trump's going to be in power. We're going to have this opportunity. And if we don't hit the gas right now on it, we're never going to get the full story of what happened. We're definitely never going to get accountability, which means all of it's going to happen again because no one's been held accountable.
So, and we kind of touched on this earlier when we talk about the careers that are in some of these agencies and operatives who are inside of there causing a lot of these problems. And what would it actually take to reform the FBI, the DOJ? Can it be done?
I think we need to have a discussion nationally about, do we need a domestic intelligence agency like the FBI? I think it is against American civil liberties at this point. I just think the amount of overreaches the FBI has had, there's a strong case to be made for significant cuts there, if not tearing the entire thing down, and finding another apparatus for federal law enforcement, like functions of the U.S. Marshals, et cetera. But these things can be reformed. You do have to go in there and you do have to fire a lot of career bureaucrats. What most people don't know, not necessarily on the DOJ side, but on the intelligence side, we can fire career bureaucrats. The senior executive system on the intel side, the senior executive National Intelligence Service, those guys can be fired at the drop of a hat. You don't need, they're not unionized. You don't have to go through all the other hoopla you have to with normal government employees. So if we had the will, we could fire a lot of seniors at the IC. Now, within the IC, you've had a whole cadre of people who've been promoted by John Brennan because he was in the IC for so long. And so you have a lot of people who basically had their careers built by him who are still in very powerful and very influential places. So there does need to be a big culling of a lot of the upper rungs of the career government service people. I'm not saying you have to fire all of them, but you do need to fire a good deal of them. And when you start getting indications that a lot of them are just trying to protect their organization, they need to go right then and there. They need to be fired right away. And we need to be able to bring in people who are there for the mission and not for personal gain.
As we close out, I want to just ask you a few rapid fire questions and just a couple, get your take on some of these.
Rapid fire.
So I want to ask you, what are you most afraid America could become over the next 20 years?
I mean, I think we're seeing it right now in Europe. I think you're seeing in Europe, you're seeing a lot of countries that at one point in time were great. They had a national identity, they had national pride, but because of a combination of open borders and just simply not having pride in their own nation anymore, they've just become this kind of watered down, teetering on, second world nation. I fear that here in America. I think if enough people check out and, don't say our institutions and our nation are worth fighting for anymore, and they simply stop voting and participating, well, between anchor babies and mass migration, they're literally going to be replaced. And then if you just look at how few people are getting married, having kids, et cetera, the demographics aren't in our favor whatsoever. And if the government continues to just be weaponized against the American people, then our government is just going to become, like our founders warned, oppressive and tyrannical. And our nation is going to go from being what the country we grew up in to being just this watered down surveillance state, essentially, maybe some combination of a welfare state. So that is probably my biggest fear.
Conversely, what gives you genuine hope?
The younger generation gives me a lot of hope. The younger millennials and the Gen Z folks, I feel like they've just grown up with so much information, and they've just seen all these different institutions fail, that they're kind of ready in a positive way to burn it down and to start again and to build back something. So actually getting out and talking to younger people, I think is very, very inspirational.
What is the single principle that guides the biggest decisions you make?
God. Yeah. So my faith. Yeah.
When history looks back on your career, what do you hope people will say about you?
I hope they'll say I told the truth and I tried to put my country first above myself.
Last question. If your children watch this interview 50 years from now, what do you hope they will understand about why you chose this life?
That's a good question. I hope that they will understand why I fought for the country and why I still want to continue to fight for the country, and that no matter how bad things get, you have to continue to fight.
Joe Kent, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for everything you've done for our country.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
That was a solid, good,
you made everybody
good interview.
People have to get loud about this. I just wanted to tell.
That was excellent. Love you guys, Quincy and Mama Bear. Appreciate it. We need to shut down the CIA, JFK. His last speech, he said he wanted to snap them like matchsticks. Yes, I was born 2 months later. Good interview. Good interview. Solid interview with Joe Kent and Brandon. I like that a lot. I think it was very revealing. He didn't bring up like Candace and Tucker and all these people. He kept the Israel thing, I think, in the right light, without him saying he's more against the government of Israel. That's what I took out of it. I took out of it that he's more against the government of Israel than anything else in regards to that segment. that area. So good stuff. Good stuff. Yep. I was looking for part 2. It said episode 1. So I don't know if there's episode 2 coming up or what, but it's not on the page, not on Brandon's page. I knew that Brandon Straka would do it better than Tuck or anyone else. Yeah, he did that well. He did that very well. Well pleased. That was good. So anything else? Nothing else. Pressing. West Coast rap, Seattle. Nothing really there. We don't know. I think that's it. I think I'm going to call it a night, y'all. I'll call it a night. Great show. Thank you very much, Vicky. I've got to go to bed. Good night. God bless. Hey, Vicky, real quick, make sure you watch last night's show, because last night's show was about Israel, the second part that you wanted to see from last week. Remember, you said you wanted to see the part about what the end time prophecy was talking about with Israel. Well, I played that last night. You weren't on here, but I was like, oh, Vicky wanted to see this. So make sure you go watch last night's episode 2 end time prophecy conference. So thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. God bless. Tanya, good hearts. Pinko says, have a good night, all. Yes, just finished reading up on the Ottoman Empire. That's dope. Philosophy and history I read for fun. It would bored most people to death what I read for fun. Philosophy, yeah. Philosophy. History can be fun. But I don't like to read. I like to read the scriptures because there's like things in there that you need to know, but I don't like to read other than that. So, all right, you guys have a blessed night. Get some rest. I will see you guys tomorrow. All right. God bless. Love y'all. Good night.
Yeah. On American streets. Yeah.
On American streets.
Yeah. Yeah. On American streets. On American streets.
Truth in the light, yeah, the whole world see. Faith front deep, where brave stand free. From quiet prayer to the place we meet. Quincy Franklin, bring truth on American streets. BCP preachers still spinning them beats. From PJJs now preaching in the streets. Fight for God and the freedom we keep. Still stand strong on American streets. Truth, let the truth ring out. Faith, that's what we about. See both sides, but we stand on truth. Call this nation back to its roots.
At his father's knee, where the roots run deep.
Freedom riders stood tall in the heat.
Now the same fire in his heartbeat.
Carry that truth on American streets. From DC down to the Texas heat. Minnesota cold, the Oregon trees. Live in the streets where the people meet. All nationwide on American streets. Truth, let the truth ring out. Faith, that's what we about. See both sides, but we stand on truth. Call this nation back to its roots. On American streets. On American streets. Thankful for family standing beside. Mods and supporters along for the ride. Sponsors and friends who keep it alive. Truth in the word is how we survive. Then Peter said unto them, repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ, for the remission of sins, and ye shall receive the gift of the Holy Ghost. On American streets. On American streets. On American streets. On American streets. American streets.